Chapter 33:29. That's right. Jingqing smiled wryly. Disciple can't compare to Grand Master. I was in a daze for half a day. Disciple couldn't figure out how the hundreds of thousands of villagers in Longevity Town could help Grand Master Xiai Heng attain fruition. What's more, he didn't seem to care about the Buddhist fruit at all. According to Xingchen, Grand Master Xiai Heng didn't react at all to the fact that he didn't attain fruition and just left. Disciple can't compare to such a pure heart. Call Xingchen over. Xiai Mei waved her hand. I'm also very curious. The power of will from hundreds of thousands of villagers can help our Buddhist sect's bodhisattva attain fruition. I want to ask in detail. Yes, disciple will call Xingchen over right away. Jingqing didn't dare delay and hurriedly got up. Just as he was about to fly out of the pavilion, he suddenly seemed to realize something. He stopped, looked around, and walked down the steps next to the pavilion. When his figure disappeared among the plum trees, Xiai Mei revealed a faint smile. However, this smile disappeared in a flash. Xiai Mei raised her head to look at the sunlight again and said in a low voice, Xiai Heng, which senior brother is this Xiai Heng? After a short while, Xingchen followed Jingqing to the pavilion. In front of Xiai Mei, Xingchen was like a little novice monk. He was very respectful and careful. After he recounted everything that had happened in the Longevity Town, he answered dozens of questions from Xiai Mei. It was only when Xingchen's forehead was covered in sweat that Xiai Mei waved her hand, indicating for him to leave. After Xingchen bowed and left carefully, Jingqing looked at Xiai Mei, who closed her eyes and pondered. He didn't dare to speak and could only stand there quietly. After the time it took to brew a cup of tea, Xiai Mei suddenly asked, Jingqing, what do you think of this matter? Disciple. Jingqing was startled and immediately said, Disciple feels that this is an excellent opportunity for our Buddhist sect to defeat the Confucian cultivators in Longevity Town. As long as we guide the ascetics into Longevity Town, Longevity Academy definitely won't be able to establish itself in Longevity Town. Jingqing, you're wrong, Xiai Mei said decisively. Completely wrong. This? Jingqing was even more shocked and hurriedly said, Grandmaster, please enlighten me. The Confucian cultivators of Immortality Town don't need to care. They have no place in Immortality Town, Xiai Mei says with a smile. Moreover, Longevity Town is the #1 town where my Buddhist sect defeated Confucian cultivators in hidden Immortal continent. Disciple doesn't see far enough. Grandmaster, please teach me. How could Jingqing have Xiai Mei's vision? Zhang Xian hurriedly asked. Jingqing, tell me, why was senior brother Xihang able to attain fruition? And it was the Bodhisattva Buddha fruit? Why didn't you succeed? I only know that in order to attain fruition, one must practice good deeds and recite Buddhist scriptures. Different good deeds lead to different Buddha fruits. How many good deeds do you think the Bodhisattva Buddha fruit needs? Xiai Mei asked with interest. No matter what. I need at least 1,000,000 good deeds, right? Jingqing hesitated. After all, the Bodhisattva Buddha fruit was too far away for him. Alas, that's not all. Xiai Mei sighs slightly and says, Attaining fruition is very complicated and can't be explained by simple good deeds. However, if we use the 9 levels of essence energy to measure the cultivation strength of the 3 continents, the Buddhist sect's Buddha fruit can also be calculated simply by good deeds. As far as I know, the most basic indigo Buddha fruit needs 300,000 good deeds to attain fruition, and the Venerable Buddha fruit is 3 times more than the indigo Buddha fruit. Ah? That much? Jingqing is shocked. Even if there are so many good deeds, it might not be enough to attain fruition, Xiai Mei says. It's also related to the cultivation of the Arhat, karma, Buddhist fate, believer's wish energy, and so on. Grand Master, let's not talk about other things, but just the good deeds, Jingqing says after some calculation. If you want to attain the Bodhisattva Buddha fruit, you need 90 million good deeds. Even the wish energy and belief of hundreds of thousands of villagers in Immortality Town isn't enough for Grand Master Xihang to attain the Bodhisattva Buddha fruit, right? Indeed, Xiai Mei nodded. This is the reason why I asked you to bring Xingchen here. I've been thinking about it for a long time, but I really don't understand how Senior Brother Tsihung can attain such a great Buddha fruit. I've already asked all the disciples to check the records of the Buddhist sect and Confucian cultivators, and even the history of Immortality Town, but I couldn't find the origin of Grand Master Tsihung. Jingqing says. Even according to the villagers of Immortality Town, it's hard to determine when Grand Master Tsihung appeared in Immortality Town. Some say it was 100 years, some say it was 1,000 years, and some say it was 10,000 years. No matter what, Senior Brother Tsihung has been to Immortality Town in the past. Otherwise, he wouldn't have left a statue in Jiangchao Temple for people to worship. Si Mei says with a nod. Senior Brother Tsihung also cultivates with hair. Could he be a lay disciple of the Buddhist sect? Jingqing probed. Si Mei looks at Jingqing and shakes her head. If he were a lay disciple, he definitely wouldn't have the Dharma name of Tsihung. Don't doubt this point. Jingqing's face turns red and he quickly says, Disciple doesn't dare, this is only my guess. This involves some secrets of the Buddhist sect. You haven't cultivated in the Buddhist temple in the Pure Land world, so you probably don't know. Si Mei doesn't blame him and says, Even I only found these records in the scripture pavilion after I took over Hanliang Temple. Jingqing puts his hands together and says seriously, If it involves the secrets of the Buddhist sect, Grand Master doesn't need to tell disciple. Si Mei smiles at Jingqing and says, That's right, it's true. Even if you don't want to know, I'll tell you. Even if you beg me, I won't tell you what you shouldn't know. You only need to understand this today to have a chance of attaining enlightenment. Yes, disciple understands. Jingqing calmly nodded. There was a look of understanding on his white-haired face. Actually, it's not much of a secret. Jingqing doesn't want to know anymore. Si Mei says seriously, Our Buddhist sect has many branches. Some are Mahayana Buddhism, some are Hinayana Buddhism, and some are the 10 Buddhist sects. Yes, disciple knows. Our Hanliang Temple belongs to the Tiantai sect. Jingqing says with a smile. It seems that in addition to the Tantric sect, there are other sects like Complete Sect, Xing sect, Xiang sect, Virtuous Head sect, Zen sect, Pure Land sect, and Vinaya sect? Yes, that's true. Si Mei nods. However, before the Buddhist light of the Pure Land world shone on the hidden Immortal continent, or perhaps before the formation of the 10 Buddhist sects, there was a Buddhist sect disciple with a completely different cultivation method from us. They were called Dutta. Dutta is also called Dutta Xing, Dutta matters, and Dutta meritorious virtue. It means to get rid of dirt and worries. It means to get rid of greed for clothes, food, and shelter in order to cultivate the mind and body. All monks who practice the ascetic practice of Dutta must strictly observe the following 12 rules of practice in their daily life. They must choose a free place. They must live a life of abstinence. They must eat sparingly. They must eat only once a day. They must beg for food, regardless of whether they are rich or poor. They must not drink milk after lunch. They must guard the 3 clothings. They must wear dung and sweep clothes. They must always sit under a tree to think. They must always meditate in the open. They must always live in the grave. They must always sit and not lie down. You can't even trim your hair or nails. Ah? There's such an ascetic cultivation method? Obviously, Jingqing has never heard of Ku Dutta and can't help but be surprised. Yes, Ku Dutta believes that a person's life is originally miserable, and only through ascetic cultivation can one pass through the sea of bitterness. However, even a trace of enjoyment will taint oneself with the fire of the sea of bitterness, and when one is reincarnated, he will fall into the animal path. Si Mei says, the minds of these monks are always tenacious, and their Buddhist doctrines are profound. Even their methods of subduing demons are better than those of us ordinary monks. I suspect that. Si Hang is Ku Dutta. Alas, I understand now. Jingqing smiles bitterly. If we Buddhists publicize Ku Dutta's cultivation method, how can there be secular people who shave their heads and become monks? People are afraid of hardships, and they find it inconceivable that they don't eat meat and get married. If they continue to live like this, they will treat us Buddhists as snakes and scorpions. That's true. Si Mei nods. Although Kuduta's cultivation method is very effective, there are very few monks who practice it, and they have already faded out of Buddhist cultivation. Of course, I admire these Kuduta a lot, and only their cultivation is true cultivation. However, this kind of cultivation is not beneficial to the illumination of our Buddhist light. If Grandmaster Siai Hang is Kuduta, it's normal that we don't know his name. Jingqing smiles obsequiously and says, moreover, he has cultivated for many years and accumulated a lot of good karma. The pure willpower of the hundreds of thousands of people in Longevity Town might be the last good karma. So, Siai Mei squints and says word by word, we want to help the villagers of Longevity Town build the golden body of Nanwu Guanyin Bodhisattva in Jiangchao Temple and help senior brother Siai Hang attain karma. Ah? Jingqing is shocked. Grandmaster, this doesn't conform to our Buddhist Dharma, right? Grandmaster Siai Hang, he has yet to achieve fruition? What is Buddhist Dharma? Siai Mei says with a smile. You know, I know, and thousands of Buddhists know. However, do the villagers of Longevity Town and the kind men and women who go to Jiangchao Temple to worship Guanyin Bodhisattva know? They want to build the supreme golden body of Nanwu Guanyin Bodhisattva in Longevity Town. Do we need to stop them? Jingqing takes a deep breath, his eyes widening as he blurts out. Supreme golden body? Grandmaster, the supreme golden body can only be built by Buddhists who have attained karma. Even if Grandmaster Siai Hang has attained karma, Guanyin Bodhisattva's karma isn't enough to build 100 feet supreme golden body. Siai Mei doesn't care about Jingqing's surprise and says slowly, senior brother Siai Hang hasn't attained karma, so he naturally can't build a golden body. Even if he did, he can only build an 80 feet Bodhisattva golden body. This is our Buddhist Dharma. However, this is the hidden immortal continent. There isn't a single golden body of Buddhism in the entire hidden immortal continent. Now that Buddha has given us the opportunity, how can we let it go? I've already sent a Buddhist certificate to Lane Temple to build a 99 feet Nanwu Guanyin Bodhisattva golden body for senior brother Siai Hang in Longevity Town's Jiangchao Temple. If nothing goes wrong, Buddha Lord will agree. -11. Chapter 33:30. Jingqing couldn't wrap his head around it. When he came, he was only thinking about how to compete with the Confucian cultivators in the Longevity Town, and how to appoint the abbot of the small gold temple. He didn't expect that when he came to Hanling Mountain, he would build the first Bodhisattva golden body in the Longevity Town in the hidden immortal continent. Moreover, it was a 99 feet tall Dharma idol, which was only a little less than a 100 feet Buddha body. This was indeed inconceivable. Siai Mei continued. Senior brother Tsihang didn't achieve fruition because his cultivation was insufficient and his willpower was insufficient. With this 99 feet Bodhisattva golden body, how could he lack willpower when millions or even billions of people came to the Longevity Town to worship him? Even if senior brother Tsihang didn't want to achieve fruition, he still had to do so. The first Bodhisattva to achieve fruition on the hidden immortal continent is in Yu Province, in the Longevity Town in the country of Shi. Jingqing, whether it's you or me, we've both made great contributions to Buddhism. This is something that has never been done before and will never be repeated in the future. Think about it, a 99 feet Bodhisattva golden body, TSK, it'll crush all the other Bodhisattvas. Yes, of course. Jingqing suddenly understood what Siai Mei was thinking. Moreover, there's another reason. Siai Mei looked at the place where the morning sun was shining in the distance. Our Hanling Temple's Buddha golden body has always been blocked by the Confucian cultivators, making it difficult to build. After so many years, benefactors have been suspicious. Now that the Longevity Town has a Bodhisattva golden body, the pressure on the Hanling Temple has decreased a lot. In particular, with the first golden body Dharma idol, the second, the third. Are they still far away? Yes, I understand. Jingqing was enlightened again. Also, Siai Mei smiled. Although Kutucho is few in number, he's always been the backbone of Buddhism. If they can achieve Bodhisattva Buddha fruit with our help, The Lane Temple will also look good. Yes, yes, I understand. Jingqing could only nod. Although Xiao Mei was only halfway through her sentence, he already understood why Xiao Mei was so certain that the Lane Temple would agree to his proposal. Of course, this seemed to involve the secrets of Buddhism, so Jingqing didn't dare to say more. Xiao Mei sighed for no reason. She withdrew her gaze from the place in the distance that was even taller than the pavilion. There was a huge platform there, and there was already a huge 9th-grade Buddha lotus on it. However, the Buddha lotus was empty. He said with some melancholy. Alas, actually, the most important thing is that I really want to know which senior brother Xihong is. How could he almost attain the Bodhisattva Buddha fruit? This is a good fruit worth hundreds of millions. Without a few lifetimes of cultivation, it is impossible to achieve. Why have I never heard of this senior brother? Speaking up to this point, Xiao Mei looked at Jingqing again. As the saying goes, when the Tao is 1 foot tall, the devil is 10 feet tall. My cultivation is more profound than yours, but my devil barrier is also deeper than yours. I was lecturing you just now, but in fact, I had an obsession before you, and even now, I don't know how to get rid of it. How could Jingqing not know what Xiao Mei meant? He put his palms together and said, Disciple understands. This is Grand Master's devil barrier. As long as I break through this devil barrier, my cultivation will advance again. Grand Master helping Grand Master Xiao Heng to attain enlightenment is also equivalent to attaining enlightenment for yourself. This is a necessary step for Grand Master's cultivation. Yes, I know it myself. Xiao Mei nodded. I've been cultivating since I was young, and my progress has been rapid. With the accumulation of 3 lifetimes, attaining enlightenment in this life is not a problem. However, the sudden appearance of senior brother Xihong really gave me a blow. Ordinary senior monks can accumulate merit for 3 lifetimes. After reincarnating, their merit will weaken. I thought for a long time. If senior brother Xihong didn't have enough merit, then his cultivation method must be extraordinary. This is why he was able to attain enlightenment so much earlier than me and have such high achievements. If I can help him attain enlightenment, it must be good karma. It will also be beneficial to my cultivation. Upon hearing this, Jingqing's heart skipped a beat. Xiao Mei's words were somewhat incoherent, and even went straight to her heart. No matter what, it shouldn't have been something he could hear. However, Xiao Mei had actually exposed herself in front of him without any scruples. If it wasn't that Xiao Mei's cultivation was high enough, then she had ulterior motives. How could Jingqing not be afraid? As if she saw Jingqing's abnormal state, Xiao Mei smiled and pointed her finger. Although they were a few feet apart, her arms seemed to have suddenly stretched out and pointed between Jingqing's eyebrows. Jingqing was shocked. Unfortunately, he didn't even have the chance to dodge. However, when Xiao Mei's hand touched between Jingqing's eyebrows, she immediately retracted her hand. Jingqing was so scared that he broke out in a cold sweat. When the sweat dripped from Jingqing's forehead, Jingqing suddenly came to his senses. It was as if he had thrown away a heavy burden. He was very convinced and said, Amitabha. Thank you, Grand Master, for clearing my doubts. Yes. Xiao Mei closed her eyes and said faintly, The matter of Nanwu Guanyin Bodhisattva's golden body is settled. You don't have to do anything. You just need to reveal the 99 feet Dharma body. Naturally, the benefactors in Longevity Town will add fuel to the fire. As for Chongyan sect, you don't have to worry about it. No matter how strong the Confucian cultivators are, they are built on the billions of ordinary people in hidden Immortal continent. They can stop us Buddhist disciples, but they don't dare to. Perhaps they can't stop crazy good men and women. Moreover, the more they stop, the more successful Nanwu Guanyin Bodhisattva's golden body will be. Disciple understands. Jingqing's face regained its calm. Disciple will make Nanwu Guanyin Bodhisattva's golden body technique my #1 priority. As for the abbot of Shaojin Temple, you don't have to send Jingqing over. Xiao Heng instructed again. I've already sent out a Buddhist edict. Lai Zhanren is the abbot of Shaojin Temple. When you leave, he will go with you to Longevity Town. Liaison? Jingqing was stunned at first, then said in shock, Grand Master, Martial Uncle Liaison, is Elder Liaison of Hanliang Temple's Sutra Pavilion? That's right. It's him. Xi Mei answered without opening her eyes. Grand Master, Longevity Town is now the focus of hidden Immortal continent. It's where we Buddhists and Confucian cultivators compete. Martial Uncle Liaison only reads Buddhist scriptures and doesn't practice magic. He's no different from ordinary people, Jingqing said anxiously. If he goes to Shaojin Temple, I'm afraid he won't be able to convince the masses. Won't be able to convince the masses? When Xi Mei heard this, she opened her eyes. 2 more lotus flowers flashed out from light and dust, giving Jingqing a fright. He looked a little panicked and said in a low voice, This disciple has a feeling. If we don't have a thunderous method, we won't be able to deal with the aggressiveness of Confucian cultivators. The aggressiveness of Confucian cultivators? Xi Mei sneered. Even Xingqian didn't have a way to deal with that Taoist cultivator, right? If it weren't for that little Taoist cultivator, how could there be senior brother Xi Hang? Jingqing, you have to remember that our Buddhist sect emphasizes the cultivation of Buddhist Dharma the most. Buddhist fruit is more important than cultivation realm. The biggest reason why I suggested for senior brother Xi Hang to attain fruit is that Ku Tuchuo has always placed Buddhist Dharma first. Senior brother Xi Hang's psychokinesis is profound, and he's proficient in Buddhist Dharma. Although Liaison doesn't have many methods to subdue demons, he has countless Buddhist scriptures in his heart. He's number 1 in fierce debate temple. Letting him be the abbot of Shaojin Temple is a powerful method for our Buddhist sect to advance in order to retreat. Jingqing was also an abbot. When he heard this, he immediately understood that Xi Mei's image in his heart was once again raised. He really couldn't understand why this handsome young monk in front of him was so intelligent and thought of everything ahead of him. This disciple understands, Jingqing replied with heartfelt admiration. Then, he thought for a moment and said with a smile, Speaking of the little Taoist cultivator of Taoism, Xiao Yi's appearance is strange. Disciple feels that this Xiao Hua's appearance is very strange. Moreover, this Taoist priest has some means. Even Xingqian is not his opponent. And that's right. Speaking of Taoism, Xi Mei frowned slightly. Lane Temple has a Buddhist edict. However, although Xiao Hua has some methods, if our Buddhist sect attaches importance to him, his cultivation is really too shallow. The Buddhist edict should have nothing to do with him. What? Jingqing, what do you think? It's nothing. This disciple just feels that he's a bit strange. If his origin is correct, we can make use of him. It wouldn't be bad for him to be our Buddhist sect's protector. Jingqing muttered to himself and spoke his bold idea. Xi Mei seemed to agree with Jingqing's words. She glanced at him and said indifferently, You're right. Although Xiao Hua isn't worthy of our Buddhist sect's roping in, he has some cultivation after all. Moreover, he's definitely older than Xingqian. You should search for his traces. This person has great strength and is suitable to be our Buddhist sect's protector. If he can convert to our Buddhist sect and then go to Jiangqiao Temple to guard the golden body of Guanyin Bodhisattva, Amitabha, that would be the most perfect ending. When Jingqing heard this, his snow-white eyebrows raised. He said with a smile, This disciple will follow martial ancestors' Buddhist edict and immediately send people to investigate. And, after hearing this, Xi Mei closed her eyes and said indifferently, Go. You only need to remember that you understand Buddhist principles, Buddhist doctrine, Buddhist scriptures, and Buddhist nature. You only need to let our Buddhist sect's Buddhist light of salvation shine on Longevity Town. You can't use any other methods to subdue demons. Amitabha, this disciple will remember. Jingqing hurriedly put his palms together and replied in a low voice. Martial ancestor has taught this disciple for a long time. This disciple already understands. This disciple will take his leave now and ask Martial Uncle Shan to condescend to become the Shaojin Temple's abbot. Xi Mei closed her eyes and ignored Jingqing. The light from the east shone on him, and the Buddhist light faintly reflected and reflected. It was a lifelike spirit lotus shape. Jingqing's eyes were filled with envy as he looked at it. He lowered his head and slowly retreated. At this time, Xiaohua naturally didn't know that he had been regarded as the best protector of Shaojin Temple by Jingqing. He also didn't know that once he appeared in Longevity Town, this small town on the border immediately became the focus of a tit-for-tat confrontation between Confucian cultivators and Buddhist sect. He also didn't know that the news of the first Bodhisattva golden body on hidden Immortal continent was true. Moreover, he didn't know that this golden body was second only to Buddha's 10-Zhang golden body. A 99-Zhang golden body of Bodhisattva was unique in the Buddhist sect. Moreover, it was created at this special time and in this special place. It was truly unprecedented and would never be replicated again. -11. Chapter 33-31. Right now, Xiaohua was sitting cross-legged on the back of the Pegasus, following the light beasts as they soared into the sky. High up in the sky, the wind was biting cold, and there were layers of cold shadows. Wisps of cloud were sharper than swords, piercing into the light feathers of the Pegasus, and even into Xiaohua's flashing body. Although Xiaohua looked as if nothing had happened, he was the only one who knew the pain inside. This wind was very powerful. It was able to freeze the true essence in his meridians. Right now, Xiaohua was only relying on his protective magic weapon to resist the wind. If he flew high up for a moment, he really couldn't guarantee his own safety. Xiaohua looked at the distance under his feet. The flaming sun was like a pellet. He patted the Pegasus's neck, and the Pegasus obediently stopped. Only then did he say, "Senior, this little one's cultivation is limited. I'm afraid I can't follow Senior on a long journey. Even if I see you off for 1,000 miles, I still have to part. This little one will take his leave now." And, seeing Xiaohua stop, the three light beasts also stopped. Especially the light baby, it actually flew in front of the Pegasus and coquettishly circled around it a few times. Then, under the lead of another light beast, it continued to fly forward. "Thy name is Xiaohua, I will remember it." The light beast's voice sounded in Xiaohua's ears. "Thou saved my child, I will repay thee. Thou can tell me what is on thy mind. As long as I can help thee, I will definitely do it." He. Xiaohua cupped his hands and said, "Senior's words are too serious. In fact, if not for Senior's appearance, Junior and the others would have fallen into the mouth of the catfish. What thou said before, I have heard it in my heart. Thou is not a monster, but you can actually stand up for my son. A group of monsters actually dared to frame me. Thou is much more magnanimous than them." The light beast said, "I can help thee, it is also my wish." Hearing the light beast's words, Xiaohua no longer pretended, and said, "Junior saw that the light baby's body is surrounded by condensed world essence qi. It is impossible to use it. Even if there is a monster cultivation method, I am afraid that the world essence qi around its body must be refined first. If I may be so bold, I would like to ask, what is this technique? Why are you asking about this?" The light beast asked coldly. "This matter seems to have nothing to do with you." Xiaohua was helpless. He had no choice but to tell the beast that his meridians and body were filled with the earth crystal Yao milk. The radiant beast looked at Xiaohua up and down as if it was pondering or probing. After a while it said, "This place is not safe. I can't talk to you too much. If you want to refine the strange things in your body, you can come here in 10 days. While speaking, a ray of light that was even thinner than a thin thread was emitted from the radiant beast's mouth and landed in between Xiaohua's eyes. While the radiant beast was startled, the heavenly eye in between its eyes flashed with a strange green light and actually blocked the penetration of this ray of light. "This is where that place is." The light beast had no choice but to explain. Good, Xiaohua was overjoyed. He quickly put away his heaven's eye. When the light appeared in his mind, it was the location of a certain place. "Thank you, Senior." Xiaohua cupped his hands. The radiant beast didn't stay any longer. It turned into a ray of light and chased after him. He. Xiaohua was very happy. He really didn't expect that the earth crystal Yao milk, which he originally planned to use more than 10 years to refine, would be solved in one night. He then patted the heavenly horse. The heavenly horse neighed and flew towards the ground. Xiaohua took advantage of this moment to wave his hand and took the Buddhist archive that he bought with a copper coin in the auction. That Buddhist archive was very old. There were some mottled black spots on it, just like moldy spots on an ordinary jade. Xiaohua's gaze fell on this Buddhist archive. He sighed in his heart. Alas, something bought with a copper coin, you really get what you pay for. I'm afraid it won't be especially precious. Although this story can't be fake, but secret techniques. Do I lack secret techniques? Thinking, Xiaohua very inadvertently sent this Buddhist archive into his Naiwen palace. However, when the Buddha relic opened the Buddhist archive and saw what was inside, Xiaohua's face lit up. Oh? Buddhist seal catalog? This is the secret technique of Buddhist sect's Buddhist seal catalog. This Xiaohua really made a big profit. Xiaohua used Buddhist seal before. He relied on the Buddha relic's Buddhist seal to control the clear water bottle. He knew that this Buddhist seal was similar to the Tao sect's technique. However, he didn't obtain the complete Buddhist seal catalog. Naturally, he didn't really practice it. Now that he unexpectedly obtained this item by chance, how could he not be happy? Taking advantage of the fact that he was still far from the ground, Xiaohua simply let the Buddha relic read this Buddhist archive. His mind was watching from the side. Xiaohua was happy at first, but the more he read, the more he frowned. This Buddhist seal catalog wasn't bad. There were 3 types of Buddhist seals inside. They were Mountainous Buddhist Seal, Stellar Buddhist Seal, and Karmic Buddhist Seal. Mountainous Buddhist Seal, as the name implies, can produce the power of mountains when used. Stellar Buddhist Seal can produce the power of stars, and Karmic Buddhist Seal can produce the power of karmic hindrances. These 3 types of Buddhist seals have 9 layers. The power of each layer is superimposed on the previous layer. When the 9 layers of Mountainous Buddhist Seal are cultivated, the power of 9 mountains will be displayed. The same is true for the power of stars and karmic hindrances. However, such a useful Buddhist seal fell into Xiaohua's eyes, causing him to be somewhat puzzled. That's right, Xiaohua's physical body has the power of mountains. That heavenly law's embodiment technique also has the power of mountains. What's the difference? Thinking of the power of mountains, Xiaohua unconsciously thought of the Confucian cultivator's 1 breath soars to the 9 heavens and 1 word to determine heaven and earth. Just like what Xiaohua said to you family's 7th uncle that day, 1 breath soars to the 9 heavens. Xiaohua understood very well that the Confucian cultivator was tempering the true qi in the chest. This true qi has myriad mysteries and can soar to the 9 heavens. However, 1 word to determine heaven and earth puzzled Xiaohua. Although Xiaohua had seen the power of the scroll's inscription and also saw the power of the Confucian cultivator's handwriting brush, it was still far from 1 word to determine heaven and earth. If 1 word to determine heaven and earth, Xiaohua's first thought should be of soul cultivation. The 365 green seal script characters could communicate with ghosts and gods. Each character could determine heaven and earth. That was the true 1 word to determine heaven and earth. Moreover, although the sword cultivators of the Dawn Rain continent also used flying swords, there were also illusory swords and transforming swords. However, when it came to the hidden Immortal continent, it was very obvious that the pure flying swords should belong to the Confucian cultivators' Maha sect. Using qi to control the sword and storing divine sense in the sword seemed to be a level higher than the sword transformation swords of the sword cultivator. Speaking of sword cultivators, Xiaohua naturally thought of Yao cultivators. Yao cultivators were originally humans, but they fused with immortal birds and borrowed the power of immortal birds. This was clearly a human approaching Yao. There was also divine sense, Buddhist awareness, and elemental awareness. Although each of these was different, if one really wanted to talk about it, there was no special difference. It's really strange. It seems different from what others said. Yao, Confucian, Buddhist, and Taoist, these 4 sects all seem to look down on other sections. Even in the hidden Immortal continent and Western paradise, the Taoist sect was destroyed by the Confucian and Buddhist sections. In the Dawn Rain continent, the Confucian and Buddhist sects were destroyed by the Taoist sect. They all said that they were the orthodox sect between heaven and earth. However, thinking about it this way, each sect always had some methods and magical abilities that were similar. How could anyone know who was the orthodox sect? Who was the plagiarist? Or it could be said that for millions of years, no one knew who was the orthodox sect? The taboo of my Taoist lineage, Confucian cultivators and Buddhist sects, was to borrow the power of heaven and earth. Whether it was magic arts or magic arts, they were all more powerful than the methods of Confucian cultivators and Buddhist sections. Therefore, if I only look at the methods of fighting, I only need to practice Taoist magic arts and don't need to practice anything else. But the problem is, Confucian cultivators Qi, Buddhist sects Saraira, and Soul cultivators Green Seal script characters, what is their true essence? Oh, and there are also demons. Demons have always looked down on humans, but unfortunately, they frequently appear in places like the hidden Immortal continent. What is the true essence of their cultivation? Thinking of this, Xiaohua's brows furrowed. This dispute between Buddhism, Taoism, and Confucianism had not been resolved for millions of years. Xiaohua, with his nascent soul cultivation, actually thought so much. Perhaps he was the first person in all of history to do so? This was also one of the big disadvantages of Xiaohua's. Biting off more than he can chew, he always thought a little more than others. And the little more he thought a little more was something that others could not even dream of. It could even be said that they could not think of it even after they became immortals. It was only this kind of thinking that made Xiaohua's path extremely difficult and unexpected. Seeing that the Pegasus had landed, Xiaohua released his divine intent. He didn't find a familiar place, nor did he find the capital of the Bronze Pillar country. After thinking for a bit, Xiaohua didn't get down from the Pegasus and waited on the side of the road. After the time it took to eat a meal, a carriage passed by on the main road. The person inside the carriage saw the majestic Pegasus, and Xiaohua on top of it, and jumped down from the carriage. They either kneeled down or respectfully came forward to greet him. Xiaohua smiled and asked for directions. In front of everyone, he patted the Pegasus' head and headed towards the direction of the Bronze Pillar country. The group of mortals prostrated on the ground and respectfully sent Xiaohua off. Knowing that there was still a distance to the Bronze Pillar country, Xiaohua narrowed his eyes and began to understand the Buddhist mountainous seal that he had just obtained. Although Xiaohua felt that whether it was his physical body or divine ability, he was comparable to this Buddhist mountainous seal. However, as his comprehension deepened, he sighed with emotion. The stone of another mountain can be used to improve jade, this is indeed the case. This Buddhist mountainous seal can actually use karma to simulate the power of the physical body. Moreover, this karma can be ingeniously expanded. This technique is also related to the size of the karma. That's right, if I can completely understand this Buddhist mountainous seal and use it on my physical body or dharma body, wouldn't it be? Ha! The more Xiaohua comprehended, the happier he became. He had already thrown his previous doubts to the back of his mind. It seemed that this comprehension and cultivation could enrich him. Not to mention Xiaohua riding the Pegasus towards the Bronze Pillar country, 300 li away from the capital of the country of Xi, there was a mountain peak that was not very tall. This mountain peak was shrouded in a faint white fog. The white clouds in the sky also flew to the edge of the mountain peak as if attracted by the beautiful scenery of the mountain peak. -11. Chapter 33-32. The scenery on the mountain peak was indeed pleasant. Not to mention the trickling streams at the foot of the mountain, the green cypresses on the side of the winding mountain path, and the faint pools that appeared from time to time under the shade of the trees, just the occasional elk and antelope that appeared between the mountain peaks and leisurely walked in front of people as if they were psychic was enough to make people's hearts stay here. The top of the mountain was a little different from the bottom of the mountain. Not only were palaces made of jade hidden in the green, but they were also embellished all around the mountain peaks. Many young men in clean clothes were either holding folding fans in their hands or holding green swords in their hands, shuttling back and forth between these palaces. Not only were they walking indifferently, but they were also flying on green lights. All of them were calm and dignified. This was the mountain gate of the Chongyun sect in the country of Shi. In the innermost part of the palaces, there was a place that looked like a jade seal, and there was a palace that looked like a crown. At this moment, in the palace, an old man with a Confucian crown on his head was sitting behind a jade table. His face was extremely solemn, and he looked coldly at the 4 people in front of him. These 4 people were none other than Mo Yen, Mo Jianli, Qiu Jian, Li Mo Ming, and Ji Dong. And this old man was the head of the Chongyun sect, Shangguan Feiyu, a great Confucian scholar who had cultivated to the level of master. Facing Shangguan Feiyu's colder gaze, Mo Jianli and the other 3 people lowered their heads, not daring to say anything. It seemed that if they moved a little, the gaze would turn into a flying sword and pierce into their bodies. Mo Yen! Although Shangguan Feiyu wanted to suppress the anger in his heart, he could not help but show it in his words. He did not even call him Jianli, as he usually did. Yes, head! Mo Jianli hurriedly answered. You really did not find the whereabouts of the old bald donkey Ci Hang? Shangguan Feiyu suppressed the anger in his heart and asked again. Mo Jianli raised his head with a bitter smile on his face and replied, Sect leader, this disciple's cultivation is limited. At that time, I lost track of Ci Hang. Senior. Later on, this disciple was busy with disaster relief. I really didn't have the time to look for that senior. And then... Speaking of this, the bitter smile on Mo Jianli's face became thicker, and he did not dare to continue. After hesitating for a while, he said, Later, I looked for the legend of the sea god in the longevity town. Stop. Shangguan Feiyu waved his hand. You have said this 4 times. Yes. Mo Jianli quickly shut his mouth. Are the villagers of longevity town really raising funds to build a Guanyin golden body? Shangguan Feiyu had just mentioned Mo Jianli, but this was the 5th time he had asked about Mo Jianli. It seemed that he did not believe the news about Mo Jianli. Mo Jianli replied respectfully, Yes. When I left, there were already tens of thousands of good people in longevity town. Many of them were rich people from the surrounding areas. They were discussing how to build 100-feet golden body in longevity town. How is this possible? Shangguan Feiyu couldn't help but stand up. The airflow around him was so strong that Mo Jianli and the other 3 couldn't stand still. Longevity Academy has been in longevity town for so many years, educating countless Confucian disciples. My Chongyun sect has protected longevity town for even longer. Why is it that a simple flooding of the town of immortals and an old bald donkey of the Buddhist sect can steal their hearts? Shangguan Feiyu really couldn't understand. Even their basic necessities, food, housing, transportation, and farmland were all given to them by the king of the country of Shi, right? Besides, the Buddhist sect has never built a Dharma golden body in Zhangxian land. Even the Buddha statues in the temples are restricted by us Confucian cultivators. For no reason, why would someone want to build a Dharma golden body in longevity town? This must be done by the old bald donkey of the Yunlin temple. The Buddhist sect must be behind this. Sect master, it doesn't matter whether the Buddhist sect is behind this or not. What's important is that we can't let the Dharma golden body be built in Jiangchao Ridge. Mo Jianli said hurriedly. Once the Dharma golden body is built, not only will the Longevity Academy lose its foothold in longevity town, even the Chongyun sect won't be able to show its face in the country of Shi. This is just a small one. Once the Dharma golden body is built, we Confucian cultivators won't be able to raise our heads. The Zhangxian land is the place where we Confucian cultivators taught. Now it has been conquered by the Buddhist sect. With this first Dharma golden body, thousands of other Dharma golden bodies will be built. We can't stop them, Shangguan Feiyu said coldly. Then Shangguan Feiyu waved his hand and said coldly, The Chongyun sect must stop this so-called Dharma golden body by any means. Yes, I understand. Mo Jianli nodded. However, before he could finish, Shangguan Feiyu said, Mo Yen, you've done a good job in the longevity town. I've already rewarded you according to your merits in the merit hall. The longevity town is getting more and more serious. Your cultivation is not enough to support it. You don't have to worry about it. This? Mo Jianli hesitated and said tentatively, although my cultivation is low, I'm very familiar with the longevity town. I know the reasons behind it. I think I can do it. Haha, familiarity and clarity are not important, Shang Wanfeiyu said with a smile. What we need now is an iron fist. Fools always think that they can defeat the heavens with their strength. However, they don't know that in the eyes of heaven, they are just ants. Our Chongyan sect has controlled the country of Xi for so many years. How can we let them succeed? We just need to ask the government to use some means to drive them away. I've only mentioned your merits and not your faults. When you go back, you have to think about it carefully. See where you went wrong and what you can gain from the longevity town. Jianli, you are the most outstanding disciple of our Chongyan sect. This old man has high hopes for you. Yes, I know. A gentleman has 3 reflections on himself. I should follow suit. Mo Jianli replied respectfully. Then, he hesitated for a moment and said, besides, I've thought about it for a long time on my way back to the sect. I have some ideas, but I don't know if they are correct. Oh? Tell us. Shang Wanfeiyu raised his eyebrows and nodded. We, the Confucian cultivators, use etiquette to educate the people. We use poems and books to pass down generations. We help people learn how to read and get rid of ignorance. We build a country and form order. But we don't form a belief in their hearts. We don't make them follow us from the bottom of their hearts. We only set up rules and regulations around them, and let them live and grow within them. Mo Jianli's tone was a little weak. He stole a glance at Shang Wanfeiyu and said tentatively, the Buddhism sect uses Buddhism to set up rules and regulations. They do things with kindness and benevolence. They make people respect them and follow them. Although people are small, there is a tiger in their hearts. We, the Confucian cultivators, can control the small people, but we can't control the fierce tiger. 1 or 2 people are easy to control. But if there are millions of people, millions of tigers, it's even harder for us to control them. It's inevitable that they will be like the flood and fierce beasts in the longevity town. Shut up. Before Mo Jianli could finish, Shang Wanfeiyu shouted, Mo Yen, do you know what you are saying? Mo Jianli was shocked. He hurriedly shut his mouth, bowed and said, I know I was wrong. I was worried because the situation in the longevity town was out of control. Jianli, you are too smart, but your experience can't keep up with your cultivation. Now you are facing a layer of mental retardation. This is both a test for you and a disaster for you. If you can get rid of the Buddhism and Confucianism, I will congratulate you. It won't take you many years to reach the level of master and become a great Confucian cultivator. But if you can't get rid of it, I'm afraid you will fall into a state of eternal damnation. Shang Wanfeiyu sighed and said, I thought you would encounter this disaster in 20 years. I didn't expect that the trip to the longevity town would bring you to this stage. It seems that the old bald donkey Xi Hang's fruit has affected you quite a bit. Mo Jianli didn't expect that his feelings would have such a deep impact. He was shocked and didn't know how to answer. Go back and cultivate in seclusion. Shang Wanfeiyu waved his sleeve. I am regretting sending you to the longevity town. Disciple understands. Mo Jianli bowed. Just as he was about to leave, he seemed to have suddenly thought of something and said, That's right, disciple mentioned to sect leader before. Sect leader, please pay more attention to that Dao sect Xiaohua. This senior has a noble character, and there are traces of Confucianism on him. If we can get him on our side, it will be beneficial to our Chongyan sect. Don't bother. Shang Wanfeiyu waved his hand in annoyance. He is just a little Taoist cultivator. Even if he has some character, what can he do? He is not worthy of our Chongyan sect. Yes, I will listen to you, sect master. Mo Jianli had a very good impression of Xiaohua. Originally, he wanted to ask Shang Wanfeiyu for a reward for Xiaohua, Unfortunately, when he reported the changes in the longevity town of Buddhism, Shangguan Feiyu could no longer stay calm. Thinking about the future of the Chongyun sect and the embarrassment of the Confucian cultivators, Shangguan Feiyu no longer wanted to reward a Taoist cultivator. Thus, Mo Jianli's last hope was shattered. After Mo Jianli and the other three left, Shangguan Feiyu took a deep breath and sat down. However, a moment later, he stretched out his hand again. His slender and fair fingers played on the white jade table as if he was playing a zither. Shangguan Feiyu frowned even more as his fingers, which were whiter than the white jade, moved. After a meal, Shangguan Feiyu's hand paused. A violent aura burst out from his fingers. The noble spirit in the air rushed into the table with this aura. Boom! Like a hammer, the jade table was smashed into pieces by Shangguan Feiyu's finger. Shangguan Feiyu stood up and said to himself, "The Buddhism sect has established a Bodhisattva Dharma body in the longevity town. This is a shame to the Chongyun sect and the Confucian cultivators. If the Chongyun sect can't deal with this alone, the other sects can't just sit and watch." Then, a cloud appeared under Shangguan Feiyu's feet. He quickly rushed out of the palace and disappeared into the depths of the Sulu Mountains. -11. Chapter 33-33. Xiaohua sat on the Pegasus and flew for an hour before he saw the silhouette of the capital city of the Bronze Pillar Nation in the distance. He then walked down from the Pegasus with a smile and kept the Pegasus in his spirit storage pouch. He had always been a person with no sense of direction. Even if someone pointed the way, he would still fly astray. Now that he had the Pegasus, Xiaohua didn't have to worry about getting lost. Moreover, in this hour, his Buddha Saraira had comprehended a lot of the mountainous Buddha seal and he had just comprehended the beginner-level water escape technique. How could he not be happy? Xiaohua flew straight to the city gate of the Bronze Pillar Nation and found a secluded place to land. He followed the crowd into the city gate. However, the moment he stepped into the Bronze Pillar Nation, a cold feeling rose in his heart. "I'll..." Xiaohua was shocked. He had already experienced this kind of impulse twice last night and today. The first time, he thought that he had encountered some kind of danger during the auction, and the danger he encountered in Catfish's body just now confirmed his thoughts. However, now that the matter had passed, he felt a warning in his heart. Last night's sudden impulse was definitely not the auction last night. Then, what could it be? Xiao Jian Lui! Suddenly, Xiaohua came to a realization. I'm afraid that the Duanwu clan was ruthless to them? That's right, Xiaohua didn't cause any trouble last night. The only possibility was the Duanwu clan. Furthermore, after Duanwu Qing and Duanwu Qiu came out from star-picking tower, they were taught a lesson by Xiaohua. One of Duanwu Qiu's arms was even crippled. Who knew if these people had learned their lesson and would go look for Xiaohua? Xiaohua had been at the auction last night. If the Duanwu clan disciples couldn't find Xiaohua, they would naturally vent their anger on Xiao Jian and the others. Damn it! Since Xiaohua knew where the matter was, how could he restrain himself? He activated the flying talisman and immediately rushed to the Seven Suns Temple while shouting, "Duanwu Qing, you better not let this old man guess correctly. If you really dare to kill, this old man will make you suffer a fate worse than death." At the same time that Xiaohua flew up, he had already released his divine sense. When that divine sense saw Xiao Jian, Yuanya, Lu Yi and Fu Jiwen standing outside the Seven Suns Temple with strange expressions on their faces, his heart unconsciously calmed down. However, when they saw that the four of them were blocked by more than 10 people in official robes, and there were many officials in front of the Seven Suns Temple, as well as many commoners, they were stunned. Immediately after, when Xiaohua's divine sense once again probed into the Seven Suns Temple, his expression suddenly changed. A wave of coldness and killing intent shot out from his body like a flying sword. If it weren't for the fact that his middle dantian was also blocked by the earth crystal Yao milk, his anger might have already shot up into the sky. What's going on? When Xiaohua arrived at the Seven Suns Temple, the expression on his face had already returned to normal. He did not enter, but instead walked down step by step, as if there was a flight of stairs beneath his feet. Senior! Before the others could recover from their shock and astonishment, Xiao Jian hastily called out. You've finally returned. Speak, what happened? Although Xiao Hua had already seen the situation inside the Seven Suns Temple, he still asked word by word like a thunderclap. Not only was Xiao Jian's ears buzzing from the shock, even the expressions of the commoners and constables in the Seven Suns Temple changed greatly. Even the constables surrounding Xiao Jian and the others retreated a few steps. Who is making such a ruckus here? An angry roar that did not seem to be inferior to Xiao Hua's roar sounded. A tall and sturdy constable with a face full of sideburns and a long blade hanging from his body charged out of the Seven Suns Temple and fiercely shouted. Xiao Hua did not pay any attention to the constable and only looked at Xiao Jian. Xiao Jian hastily explained. Senior, we separated from Senior in front of Jai Xinglu and returned to the Seven Suns Temple. However, because we were really thirsty, we rested in a small shop by the roadside. However, when we returned to the Seven Suns Temple, the entire Seven Suns Temple was silent and the temple door was wide open. Junior thought that Senior Dao Shan and his disciple had already rested and was about to find a place to rest when Yuanya discovered that our horses had all died in the temple. Furthermore, before Junior could go and check the situation, the constables of the Copper Pillar Nation charged in and chased us out of the Seven Suns Temple without any explanation. Furthermore, they imprisoned us here and did not allow us to leave. Xiao Hua indifferently nodded his head. He raised his eyes to look at the constable and coldly asked, Where is Great Master Dao Shan? He. Little Taoist, aren't you quite powerful? With such a loud voice, I wonder how your old Taoist is doing? The constable said with a smile. Without waiting for the constable to finish speaking, a quick-witted constable hastily ran to the constable's side and whispered a few words into his ear. The constable's expression slightly changed as he looked at Xiao Hua from head to toe. It was as if he did not believe that Xiao Hua came from the sky. Let this old man ask you, how is my Taoist Dao Shan and the 19 disciples of the Seven Suns Temple? Xiao Hua's eyes slightly narrowed as he indifferently asked. Humph, little Taoist. The constable coldly snorted and said, This old man knows that you are someone with cultivation. However, don't forget that this is my Copper Pillar Nation. Even if you have some tricks up your sleeve, if you want to live, you have to watch with your tail between your legs. Perhaps the Seven Suns Temple was your Taoist sect's property before, but now this property no longer has an owner. You have no right to point your finger at this old man here. Furthermore, such a huge matter has already broken out of your Taoist sect's control. Right now, the Seven Suns Temple has already been listed as a forbidden area by the Yamen. If you don't want to get into trouble, then hurry up and leave. Ha! Xiao Hua faced the sky and laughed loudly. He laughed so hard that tears were about to flow out of his eyes. He pointed at the Seven Suns Temple and said, What a joke. This Seven Suns Temple was bought by my Taoist sect with real money. Even if Dao Shan and the rest died, the Seven Suns Temple is still my Taoist sect's property. Since when is it your Yamen's turn to speak? Ah? Dao. Great Master Dao Shan? Xiao Jian was shocked. He is. How do you know that the old Taoist is dead? Humph, looks like you have your eyes on the property of the Seven Suns Temple. You poisoned the old Taoist to death and want to set up your own sect here. The constable said with a sinister laugh. Xiao Hua laughed. You seem to have said those words just now, right? If you didn't say it, how would this old man know? When did this old man say it? The constable looked around and asked, Tell me, how come this old man doesn't remember such a thing? You said it yourself just now. This one heard it clearly. Fu Jiwen, who was at the side, did not immediately greet Xiao Hua. At this moment, he opened his mouth and said, Even if we are in court, this one will still say it. The constable looked at Fu Jiwen's scholarly robes and pondered for a moment. The arrogance on his face was wiped away and replaced with a smile. Since this scholar is testifying, then this old man might really have said it. Forget it, little Taoist, you, quickly leave. This Seven Suns Temple matter is rather strange. It has nothing to do with you. No. Xiaohua shook his head slightly. Dao Shan is my Taoist disciple. Since he is dead, then this old man must get to the bottom of this matter. And since you want to know, then this old man will tell you. The constable said impatiently. There are 20 people in Seven Suns Temple. Every one of them strangled themselves to death by strangling their own throats. The coroner in the yamen has already checked and there are no signs of homicide. Homicide has already been ruled out. Suicide? Ha! Xiaohua laughed from extreme anger. Furthermore, they strangled themselves to death with their own hands? Don't you think that these words sound very funny? Funny? What's funny about it? The constable said coldly. A few days ago, there was someone who used a knife to stab himself 17 times. He stabbed himself until he was in a mess and committed suicide. This is the judgment of the coroner, the conclusion of my Tongzhou country's yamen. Good, good, good. Xiaohua said good 3 times in a row. Then, he turned his head to look at the surroundings and said with a smile, Fellow villagers, all of you live near Seven Suns Temple and have met old Taoist Dao Shan many times. You all know this kind old man very well. Now that old Taoist Dao Shan strangled himself to death, do you all believe it? Although Xiaohua was full of smiles, his gaze was like a sword. Everyone who looked at him retreated. If they didn't lower their heads, then they looked elsewhere. No one answered him. It doesn't matter if you believe it or not. It doesn't matter if they believe it or not. This old man believes it. The constable seemed to be very clear about the crowd's avoidance, and said with a smile. However, before he could finish speaking, he felt a flash in front of his eyes. Xiaohua, who was still quite far away from him, suddenly appeared in front of him. You! The constable was shocked. He flicked his hand and was about to pull out his knife. Unfortunately, just as his hand touched the handle of the knife, he heard Xiaohua say coldly, It doesn't matter if you believe it or not. The key is that this old man doesn't believe it. Following Xiaohua's cold voice, Xiaohua raised his hand. His right index finger suddenly appeared between the constable's brows. Endless terror appeared in the constable's eyes. Because in front of him, when the finger moved, it brought about swaying starlight. Clusters of dark green brilliance burst out like exploding stars. Countless scenes were shattered by the finger, as if the constable himself was about to fall into the shattered starlight. However, just as Xiaohua's finger was about to touch the constable's eyes, it suddenly froze there. This constable is an evil person's evil words and is really disgusting. However, he might not be the real culprit who killed Dao Shan. He might not even know some inside information. This Xiaohua's soul-searching finger can't guarantee that this constable's soul is intact. If this Xiaohua can't find anything related to Dao Shan, won't this Xiaohua also become an evil person? Xiaohua narrowed his eyes. However, his index finger stopped in midair as if it was cast from copper and iron. After half a cup of tea's time, Xiaohua laughed coldly and said coldly, Humph! Good will be rewarded with good. Evil will be punished with evil. It's not that there's no revenge, it's just that the time hasn't come. When the time comes, those who have enmity will take revenge and those who have resentment will complain. -11. Chapter 33-34. Speaking until here, Xiaohua waved his hand and disappeared from the constable's sight. He looked at Xiao Jian and the others and shouted, You all, follow me! Yes. Xiao Jian did not know why Xiaohua suddenly stopped, but he still turned his head obediently. Currently, Seven Suns Temple was a place of trouble, so Xiao Jian did not dare to stay for long. Xiaohua had just left when the constable was covered in sweat and collapsed on the ground. Xiaohua gave him too much power. He opened his mouth and wanted to say something, but an indescribable tiredness emerged from the bottom of his heart. Moreover, an unpleasant smell of urine came from his crotch. He lowered his head in shock and only then did he realize that he had unknowingly peed himself. Xiaohua's face was like water, and his eyes were filled with anger. He walked out of Seven Suns Temple's dilapidated mountain gate step by step. The surrounding villagers all lowered their heads and hurriedly made way for him. Even the surrounding constables did not dare to block him and dispersed in panic. After crossing the small bridge over the river, they arrived at the smelly street. At this moment, there were no pedestrians on the street. It was obvious that the surrounding residents and pedestrians were gathered at Seven Suns Temple to watch the show. Xiao Jian looked around and walked a few steps to Xiao Hua's side. He said softly, "Senior, there must be something fishy about Senior Dao Shan's death." "You!" Xiao Jian. Hearing this, Xiao Hua stopped and looked at this cultivator who was once the ruler of a country. He said word by word, "To be honest, I do not have a good impression of you. It can be said that this period of time has been testing you. I will not hide the results of the test from you. You still cannot satisfy me. If it was not for Dao Shan's matter and the tragedy of Seven Suns Temple, I would not have helped you. However, now I understand. Every disciple of the Dao sect is precious. Although you have flaws, you are still a disciple of the Dao sect. I am a senior of the Dao sect. If I don't help you, who else can I help? Now, even if I want to help Dao Shan and let him live for another 100 years, it is impossible. Therefore, Xiao Jian, you must cherish this opportunity and not disappoint me again." As Xiao Hua spoke, he waved his hand and a heavenly mending pill appeared in his hand. "This is my Dao sect's heavenly mending pill. It's a spirit medicine used to repair your meridians and dantian. Your cultivation has been crippled, so you need this to restore your strength. Furthermore, this old man promises to help you restore your country. Chase the Buddhist sect out of the country. Disciple thanks Master." Xiao Jian was truly overjoyed. The long-cherished wish that he had always kept in mind had actually come true at this moment. He hurriedly knelt on the ground and kowtowed to express his gratitude. Xiao Hua said indifferently, "This old man is only helping you, a disciple of the Dao sect. I will not accept you as a disciple. Yes, Senior has been so kind to this junior, comparable to a teacher. Junior will perform the etiquette of a disciple in front of Senior for the rest of my life." Xiao Jian hurriedly said. "As you wish." Xiao Hua handed the sky-mending pill to Xiao Jian, then looked at Fu Jiwen and said, "Fellow Taoist Fu, Xiao Jian and the others' cultivation levels are low. I originally wanted to send them out of the Bronze Pillar Nation, but I was afraid that there would be more changes in the Seven Suns Monastery. Therefore, I will have to trouble fellow Taoists to send them out of the Bronze Pillar Nation. Fellow Taoist Xiao wants to." Fu Jiwen had been silent the entire time. Hearing Xiao Hua's words, he immediately understood what Xiao Hua was thinking. He hurriedly said, "Although Great Master Dao Shan's death is extremely strange, now that the Bronze Pillar Nation's government is involved, from what the constable said, there seems to be more secrets. If fellow Taoist wants to speak up for Great Master Dao Shan, you must have evidence. Otherwise, you will be going against the entire Bronze Pillar Nation. Immortal Elder." Just as Fu Jiwen was persuading Xiao Hua, a disheveled child beggar called out softly beside a dilapidated house in the distance. "See, isn't this the evidence?" Xiao Hua smiled and said, "You can go now. I will go find you later. You don't need to persuade me anymore. Just like what you saw at the auction, although I want to settle things peacefully sometimes, there are people who want to ride on my head and shit on me. Sometimes I feel that I can tolerate it, and use slightly more peaceful methods to deal with it. However, human nature is too evil. Kind people are bullied and kind horses are ridden. Always enduring and giving in is not the best strategy. Dao Shan's tragedy made me see clearly that the filth of this world still needs to be used with thunderous methods. Otherwise, what is the use of heavenly thunder in this world? What is the use of righteous spirit? Today, I will control the heavenly thunder and kill these rascals." Immortal Elder. Yuanya shook his head. "This kid is not talented, shut up." Xiao Hua did not wait for him to finish speaking. He waved his hand and took out a magic hammer and handed it to him. "Seeing that you are not used to using the stick, it's better to use the hammer. In the future, hold this hammer by yourself." "I don't care anymore." Yes, immortal elder. Yuanya did not dare to contradict Xiaohua, and took the hammer and replied. Louis was still quick-witted, and said from the side, Taoist elder, you should do your own things. After we leave Bronze Pillar Nation, we will head towards Jiang country. Our leg strength is not as good as Taoist elders, so we will wait for you in front. And go, don't delay. Xiaohua waved his Taoist robe and quickly walked towards the beggar who had already shrunk his head. Fellow Taoists, let's leave quickly. Fu Jiwen looked at Xiaohua's skinny back and walked away resolutely. His eyes flashed with an indescribable light as he urged Xiao Jian and the others. We can't help Senior Xiao. It's best if we don't become his burden and leave as soon as possible. Yes, Xiao Jian carefully hid the heaven-mending pill, and with Xiaohua's promise to help him restore his country, he hurriedly followed Fu Jiwen towards the city gates of Bronze Pillar Nation. Xiaohua walked into the dilapidated house, but after a while, he calmly walked out again. Looking at the Seven Suns Temple in the distance, the corner of his mouth raised a few times in disdain, and he muttered to himself. Since ancient times, officials and bandits have always been close. How can the officials of Bronze Pillar Nation be an exception? Since I am sure, how can I let you all go? Immediately after, just as Xiaohua was about to activate the flying talisman, he saw 1 zhang tall stone tablet on the side of the street. This stone tablet was very old, and the words on it had long been worn out, making it impossible to clearly see what it was. Xiaohua walked in front of the stone tablet, looked at it, and said with a smile, I was just worried that I didn't have anything to erect a stone tablet for Dao Shan. This thing is very good. As he spoke, he stretched out his hand, grabbed the side of the stone tablet, and shouted, Rise! Inside the Seven Suns Temple, in front of the main hall, the constable who had just been scared to death was sitting on a dilapidated chair. It was as if he had just come back to life, and there was a trace of blood on his face. Next to him stood a few constables, as well as an old man with a protruding mouth and monkey cheeks. Although the constable's voice was trembling, he still forced himself to be calm. Who am I? I am a constable under the magistrate's command. Although that guy has some tricks up his sleeve, he is still a remnant of the Taoist sect, so how could he dare to oppose me? Lend him 10 more guts. Just as the constable said this, he suddenly felt that something was wrong, and hurriedly looked around, but didn't see anything strange. However, a moment later he heard the sound of wind whistling in his ears. He hurriedly raised his head and saw a huge black shadow descending from the sky. That black shadow blocked the scorching sun, and the constable was so frightened that he hurriedly jumped up from his chair. Unfortunately, just as his butt left the chair, a voice that made him tremble with fear came from midair. I don't need to lend you more guts. As long as I have a pure loyalty in my heart, it will suffice. As Xiaohua's voice fell, the several zhang long and several qi tall stone pillar also fell from midair, and with a rumbling sound, it caused the entire Seven Suns Temple to shake. What are you doing? The constable was shocked. I am the constable of the Copper Pillar State. If you dare to hurt me, the Copper Pillar State will definitely cut you into 1,000 pieces and chop you into mincemeat. Ha! Xiaohua's figure landed on the stone pillar, and his gaze swept across the Seven Suns Temple as he said, The Taoist sects of the world have long declined, and the hidden immortal Taoist sect has opened today. With me, Xiaohua, in this world, you dare to let your disciples be bullied and humiliated. Xiaohua's voice was extremely loud, and it spread in all directions, following which he coldly said, If a person blocks me, I will kill a person. If a city blocks me, I will kill a city. If a country blocks me, I will kill a country. How dare you? The constable was so frightened that his face turned pale, and his shout was no different from begging for mercy, while the monkey-faced old man beside him trembled and shouted, Immortal Elder, you are an immortal elder. How can you lower yourself to the same level as us? How can you kill people like us who don't even have the strength to truss a chicken? Dao Shan also doesn't even have the strength to truss a chicken, but he actually choked himself to death. Since you all are the same, then choke yourselves to death too. Xiaohua sneered, and waved his hand. Wu Qian, prepare to die. When the constable named Wu Qian heard this, he trembled even more and hurriedly shouted, "Immortal Elder, this is not this little one's." Looking at Wu Qian, who seemed to be begging for mercy, but suddenly, Wu Qian's hand reached into his bosom, and a 1-foot-long scroll was taken out from his bosom. A sinister smile appeared on his face, and without even thinking, he waved his hand, and that scroll was blown away by the wind. Woo! Thousands of noble qi moved along with the scroll, like a whirlwind, and a several feet long light pillar stirred up the noble qi, and shot towards Xiaohua's chest. Ha ha ha! Although Confucian cultivators cultivate the noble qi, how can this noble qi be the same as the noble qi of the world in your hands? Not to mention that this scroll can't hurt this Xiao, even if it's 10 times the size of a scroll. What can you do? Xiaohua laughed loudly, and raised the wishful staff in his hand. Big, big, big. 3 times in a row, the wishful staff became 10 feet long and as thick as a bull. With a wave of Xiaohua's arms, boom! It hit the light pillar of the scroll. Puff! After hearing the rumbling of the earth, the scroll couldn't withstand the power of Xiaohua's wishful staff, and was actually broken by the force, turning into thousands of fragments floating in the air. Ah! Wu Qian was so surprised that he couldn't close his mouth. He had never heard of anyone who could break a scroll written by a great scholar with just a weapon. "Immortal Elder, please spare my life, this little one is willing to say anything." After being surprised, Wu Qian immediately begged for mercy. As a constable, he knew better than anyone the importance of begging for mercy. -11. Chapter 33-36. Xiaohua sneered. Why would he care about Wu Qian's begging? He stretched out his hand again, and the soul-searching finger that could move the starry sky appeared between Wu Qian's eyebrows. This time, Xiaohua did not hesitate and even said, "I don't need your surrender, and I don't need your information. The things in your soul are far more reliable than the things in your mouth." Wu Qian's entire world was shattered, and it could no longer be restored. Everything about him had turned into a grayish-black color. Seeing Wu Qian standing there in a daze, not moving an inch, and Xiaohua's outstretched hand flickering with a faint dark green radiance, the monkey-faced old man and the other bailiffs didn't dare to stay any longer. Each and every one of them forced themselves to focus and did their best to move their trembling legs, wanting to escape from Seven Suns Temple. Xiaohua's eyes were tightly shut, and his face became increasingly serious and gloomy. A kind of killing intent was gradually emitted from his body. Seeing that the constables had already escaped from the Seven Suns Temple, Xiaohua raised his hand, and the god power centipede came out from the space. "Go!" Xiaohua ordered. "Kill him, and him!" Woo! The god power centipede whistled and flew out from the Seven Suns Temple. In an instant there were 4 blood-curdling screams outside, and the hysterical screams of the crowd. "Run! The demon is killing people!" Amidst the panic screams, the god power centipede quickly flew back. Its body was surrounded by black gas, and it was truly terrifying. "Humph!" Xiaohua pulled his hand out from between Wu Qian's eyebrows and said coldly, "I didn't expect you to be even more sinister than the mountain bandits. No less than 20 people have died in your hands. Today, I'll let you off easy." As he spoke, Xiaohua waved his hand, and the god power centipede flew over again. The 2 antennae in front of its head were 10 times sharper than scissors, and it flashed past Wu Qian's waist. After the cold light passed, Wu Qian's body still stood there quietly. Only the blood that gushed out afterwards showed that he had been cut in half by the god power centipede. "This blood can't be wasted." Xiaohua looked at it and sneered. He flew up again and used his hand to push the stone tablet that was half a meter deep into the ground. He forcefully pushed it several meters into the ground, leaving only about half a meter above the ground. It was just like an erect tablet. Xiaohua stretched out his hand and put his index finger and middle finger together to write on the stone tablet. "This is the land of the Dao sect, only good people can enter. Otherwise, you will be killed without mercy." Then, he waved his hand again, and several streaks of blood-red light flew out from Wu Qian's body and painted the words on the stone tablet. The dozen or so words couldn't be said to be neat or calligraphy, but their bloody appearance was truly terrifying. Alas, Grand Master Dao Shan! Xiaohua sighed and walked to the main hall with light steps. He gently raised his hand and the originally tightly shut door opened with a soft sound. Xiaohua walked into the main hall quietly as if he was afraid to disturb Dao Shan's rest. Although Xiaohua had used his divine telekinesis to check on Dao Shan, he could not help but grit his teeth when he saw Dao Shan's miserable state with his own eyes. He saw Dao Shan sitting cross-legged on a praying mat and facing many memorial tablets. He was still wearing the new Taoist robe that he wore when he saw Xiaohua. The white hair on his slightly drooping head was still neat and tidy. However, Dao Shan's hands were now clutching his neck. His neck was bruised and the marks of 10 fingers were extremely obvious. What Xiaohua could not bear to look at the most was that Dao Shan's face was green and his eyes were wide open. An expression of disbelief lingered in his dead fish-like eyes. At this moment, Dao Shan's eyes were protruding, as if all the resentment in his heart was concentrated there. His tongue was slightly stuck out of his mouth, and there was a layer of light purple. There were actually 2 or 3 rice grains in his dried saliva. Xiaohua shifted his gaze away from Dao Shan and his gaze fell on the shrine wall that was originally dedicated to the Dao ancestor. His gaze swept across the many old memorial tablets. Previously, Xiaohua did not feel anything when he saw these memorial tablets. Now, it seemed to be divided into different categories. Each memorial tablet seemed to be mocking. It was the mocking of the Confucian cultivators to the Dao sect and the Buddhist sect to the Dao sect. Go! Xiaohua waved his hand and a few wisps of flame flashed. He said coldly, "Since you can't protect your disciples, what's the use of you staying here? Why don't you just go back? Even if you have the true body of the Dao ancestor, why do you need to worship the Dao sect's disciples when they are brutally killed? In the future, you might as well worship this Xiao." Seeing that the shrine wall of the main hall was slowly burning, Xiaohua turned around and waved his hand. He picked up Dao Shan's remains out of thin air, as if Dao Shan was still alive. He said indifferently, "Great Master Dao Shan, this Xiao knows that you died with grievances. You don't know why you ended up like this after doing good deeds for your entire life. Since the heavens sent this Xiao here, then this Xiao will answer this question of yours. Follow this Xiao. This Xiao will let you see what is called black and white, what is called retribution, what is called killing without mercy." After walking out of the main hall, Xiaohua placed Dao Shan's remains in front of the blood steel. Then, he walked to the backyard. There were also several tens of pitiful Taoists who had the same appearance as Dao Shan. Even the few fine horses that Xiaohua brought were lying dead in the corner of the wall. Looking at this miserable situation, Xiaohua was truly furious. He really couldn't think of how Wu Qian could make the coroner conclude that this was a suicide. This was really inconceivable and impossible to justify. However, at the same time, he also understood that this so-called justification was only a kind of explanation to others. Since others didn't need an explanation, and no one would stand up for the pitiful Dao sect's disciples, there naturally wasn't any need for an explanation. Soon after, Xiaohua put away those rations. Then, his gaze fell on the corpses of these Taoists. Amitabha, Xiaohua pondered for a moment, and released the Buddha's saraira. As soon as the Buddha's saraira appeared, it immediately gave rise to a heavenly phenomenon. A kind of unconcealable benevolence seemed to have materialized and spread in all directions. Not good! How could Xiaohua expect such an unforeseen event? He didn't have time to use the confrontation, divine ability, and hastily put the saraira into his mind palace. Sure enough, as soon as the Buddha's saraira disappeared, the heavenly phenomenon also disappeared. What is going on? Xiaohua was somewhat depressed. He was originally hesitating whether or not he should use the Buddha's saraira to transcend these dozens of Dao sect's disciples. Since this wasn't appropriate, there was naturally no need to use it. Moreover, it had been a long time since they were brutally killed. Even if there were vengeful spirits, they should have already dissipated, right? Rise! Since the Buddha's Saraira couldn't be used, Xiaohua flew up. He clenched his fists and closed his eyes. He carefully comprehended the little bit of Buddha's seal technique that he had just comprehended. After that, he waved his hand. Boom! A loud sound resounded. As the earth and mountains shook, a deep hole several feet in size appeared on the ground. Disciples of the Tao sect, you can go now. I, Xiaohua, will redress your grievances and kill the culprit with my own hands. After saying that, Xiaohua sent the corpses of these Tao sect's disciples into the hole with a heavy heart, and buried them one by one. After burying the Tao sect's disciples, Xiaohua took the carriage that he came in from the rear courtyard to the front of the main hall. He removed the shed and placed Dao Shan's corpse on top of it. At this moment, there was a commotion outside the Seven Sons Monastery. It was very chaotic. There were already many soldiers and constables surrounding the Seven Sons Monastery. However, none of them dared to barge into the Seven Sons Monastery. They only stuck their heads out and looked around while holding their weapons and shouting outside. Blood steel, ah, blood steel! Xiaohua stared at the bloody steel. I, Xiaohua, am not willing to stain my hands with blood. However, since someone dares to bully my Tao sect, I, Xiaohua, don't mind staining my hands with blood. Not to mention staining my hands with blood, even if I enter the depths of the netherworld sea of blood, so what? I hope that the blood steel can wake up people who are blinded by greed. There is nothing in this world that can be covered up. In this world, there are also people who are not afraid of death, and who are not afraid of evil. After he finished speaking, Xiaohua extended his index finger again and wrote the words, Xiaohua of the Tao sect, stroke by stroke under the blood steel. His handwriting was not familiar, but it contained the determination of that side. Because after these words, what Xiaohua had to face was no longer the carefree feeling he had in the past. What replaced it was a heavy burden and oppression. Perhaps there would also be endless pursuit. However, under this kind of choice, Xiaohua could not shirk his responsibility. The times create heroes. Perhaps this was another era where heroes would appear in large numbers. Soon after, Xiaohua waved his hand. The Pegasus, Little Black, and Little Yellow all flew out. Xiaohua whispered to Little Yellow and Little Black for a moment. The two little things turned into black lightning and yellow wind and rushed out from the backyard. Xiaohua pulled the Pegasus, faced the sky and roared. He let the Pegasus pull the worn-out carriage and soared into the sky. Lu! Following Xiaohua's roar, the Pegasus also raised its head and roared. As if it had sensed the anger in Xiaohua's heart, the worn-out carriage flew high into the sky. The Pegasus spread its feathers that were several jong long. A glaring brilliance shot out in all directions. It was even more glaring than the scorching sun at noon. Under this intense brilliance, Xiaohua put his hands behind his back and coldly looked into the distance. He simply did not care about the hundreds of villagers who were prostrating on the ground and the hundreds of soldiers who were panicking. In Xiaohua's eyes, there was only the hatred of killing the main culprit, only the sorrow of the decline of the Taoist sect. He did not know that the Pegasus flight was already a leap in his mental state. It even more brilliantly opened a new chapter in the rise of the Taoist sects in the 3 continents. The Pegasus leaped through the sky and rushed out of the Seven Sons Temple. It did not fly towards the outside of the bronze pillars. Instead, it made a slight turn and directly landed at a place not too far away from the Seven Sons Temple. One could only see that this place was like a garden. There was a small bridge overflowing water. The sound of water gurgling could be heard. There were corridors and pavilions, and the lush greenery was faintly discernible. From time to time, there would be some scholars' robes and scarves swaying in the lush greenery. Their jade-like spirit and delicate appearance were all very handsome for a moment. Opposite the garden, there were rows of red walls and green tiles. The red walls were at least several jong tall and extended for an extremely long time. There were also many green tiles inside. One could not see the end of them with a single glance. In the middle of the red walls, there was a door that was several jong tall and several jong wide. It was dazzling in gold and jade. On top of it, there were 5 words written in gold and iron. Bronze Pillars Imperial Academy. The real culprit who killed Master Dao Shan was actually a scholar? -12. Chapter 33-37. On the 2 sides of the gate, there were 2 strange beasts standing there majestically. One was a horse neighing at the sky, while the other was a strange beast that looked like a radiant beast but had a turtle shell on its back. Both beasts carried something on their backs. On the horse's back was a picture scroll, while on the strange beast's back was a red brush. Through the majestic gate, there was a straight and wide road inside the Imperial Academy. At the end of the road was another Confucian cultivator statue that was several feet tall. This Confucian cultivator statue was dressed in a simple Confucian robe. His forehead was protruding and his hands were raised in front of his chest. His hands were also holding a scroll and a red brush. Around the statue of the Confucian cultivator, along with the sound of reading from the Imperial Academy, countless amounts of clear air were emitted from the surroundings. They swam in the air above the Imperial Academy like fishes and revolved freely around the statue. Wave after wave of righteous energy spread from the Imperial Academy to the entire Bronze Pillar country. It was a peaceful and bright world. Unfortunately, this idyllic scene was suddenly shattered by the loud neigh of a horse. Not only did the orderly and righteous energy soar into the sky and rush towards the neigh of the horse, even the gazes of the students in the Imperial Academy were attracted by the neigh of the horse. When they looked over, what kind of scene was that? A radiance comparable to the bright moon fell from the sky. Within the radiance, there was a sacred Pegasus with its mane fluttering. On the Pegasus' back, there was a tall and skinny man standing solemnly. His face carried an aura of authority, as he descended along with the Pegasus like a deity descending from the heavens. However, after the Pegasus, there was a tattered carriage that made everyone's eyes pop out. Even though the carriage was much brighter under the radiance of the Pegasus, everyone could tell that it was just an ordinary carriage. However, when their gazes turned to the carriage and saw Dao Shan sitting cross-legged with his head slightly drooping, they couldn't help but gasp. Everyone's heart was on alert. This descending from the sky was definitely not a good thing. It might be some kind of disaster. The students of the academy were not the only ones who attracted attention. On the way from the Seven Suns Temple to the academy, and even further away, the citizens of the Copper Pillar country who saw the heavenly steed's brilliance all rushed towards the academy. Everyone wanted to know who was on the heavenly horse, and who was the one who died on the tattered carriage. Moreover, Xiaohua rode the heavenly horse down from the sky. Before he even landed, there were already dozens of divine senses that swept out from the academy. They were very curious, and even warned him. Xiaohua ignored the curious divine sense, but he immediately countered the warning divine sense with a soul stab. This Confucian cultivator's divine sense seemed to have borrowed from the Tao sect. This soul stab technique was the old ancestors' club. After a silent contest, some of the divine senses quickly retreated. It was obvious that they had other plans. However, some of the divine senses hesitated. When Xiaohua's nascent soul-level divine sense swept over, these divine senses retreated. At the same time, within the academy, there were some figures moving. Many scholars and literary masters had begun to move. Xiaohua's face was still as calm as water. He followed the heavenly horse and landed in front of the Copper Pillar Imperial Academy. Looking at the crowd coming from all directions, as well as the curious and surprised students, Xiaohua flew down from the heavenly horse and walked step by step towards the dazzling golden gate. As he walked, he said, "There is righteousness in heaven and earth." The academy is the place where righteousness gathers. People of the secular world can't distinguish the ghosts of the world. The students of the academy should be happy, read books, understand etiquette, know shame, and should keep themselves clean. Since there are students of the academy who knowingly broke the law and committed heinous crimes, this so-called Imperial Academy cannot escape. With such scum in the academy, what right does it have to educate the world? What right does it have to build a gate here? There is a saying in the world, if you want to be a whore, you still want to build a monument. How can there be such a good thing? Come, 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 let this Xiao smash this chastity monument square that looks like gold and jade on the outside and rotten on the inside. As Xiao Hua's voice boomed like thunder, and as Xiao Hua walked step by step towards the entrance of the Imperial Academy, the expressions of countless scholars changed drastically. They had never encountered a situation where someone dared to destroy the entrance of the Imperial Academy. Even if the entire Bronze Pillar country was defeated, no one dared to invade the Imperial Academy. This was because everyone knew that even though the Imperial Academy and the Copper Pillar country were inextricably linked, it was still where the Confucian cultivators resided. Offending the Imperial Academy was the same as offending the Confucian cultivators. In the vast hidden Immortal continent, who would dare to offend the Confucian cultivators? Xiao Hua's actions of slapping them in the face were truly embarrassing. Clang clang. Numerous flying swords rang out. Pale green sword radiance rushed out from within the academy. Woo woo. Numerous whimpering sounds of the wind rose. Pale white righteous chi also rushed out from within the academy. Their target was Xiao Hua. They all wanted to stop Xiao Hua from destroying the archway. Unfortunately, Xiao Hua simply did not care about these. He was only a few feet away from the magnificent gate. With a raise of his hand, the wishful steel staff appeared in his hand again. Grow! Xiao Hua roared. Destroy all evil in the world! Grow! Xiao Hua roared for the second time. Shatter all hypocrisy in the world! Grow! Xiao Hua roared for the third time. Clear all evil! With Xiao Hua's thunderous roar, the wishful steel staff suddenly became more than 10 feet long. Under the angry wave of Xiao Hua's wishful steel staff, it issued a buzzing sound and smashed the thousands of righteous chi in the surroundings, smashing towards the dazzling golden gate. How dare you! Several surprised and resentful voices could not help but shout out. The sword radiance and righteous chi that attacked Xiao Hua hurriedly rushed towards the wishful steel staff. Rumble! Xiao Hua's Dao sect magical power was not at its peak, but the power of his physical body was unaffected. Even after being tempered by the origin of the earth, his strength was even more boundless. This wishful steel staff was now as heavy as 10,000 caddies. How could a simple sword radiance and righteous chi block it? After a few deafening sounds, Xiao Hua's wishful steel staff smashed into the gate with a bang. The gate of the Bronze Pillar State Imperial Academy that had stood for so many years collapsed. The sound of this collapse was far worse than the previous sound of fighting, but this collapse was far from being comparable to a fight. The eyes of countless students showed pain. Countless students' hearts were bleeding. The perfection in the minds of countless students collapsed. Countless students' faces showed indignation. The face of the Bronze Pillar State Imperial Academy was actually easily defeated by Xiao Hua when a group of Confucian cultivators were caught off guard. Open! The wishful steel staff had indeed destroyed the gate. Immediately, Xiao Hua did not stop. With a swing of the wishful steel staff, he destroyed the red wall and the strange beast statue near the gate, revealing a gap that connected to the academy. Then, with a wave of his hand, the Pegasus that stopped in the distance unfolded its wings of light and flew towards the gap. Who are you? What kind of bear's heart and leopard's guts did you eat? How dare you destroy the gate of my academy and break through the gate of my academy? Do you not put us, the thousands of Confucian scholars, in your eyes? A trembling voice came from within the academy. An old man dressed in Confucian robes stepped on a flying sword. Behind him, 2 middle-aged Confucian cultivators flew out of the academy in a flustered and exasperated manner. At the same time, several cultivators dressed in Confucian robes also flew out from several directions of the academy with ashen faces. Xiao Hua waved his hand and the wishful steel staff shrank to about 10 feet. He casually held it in his hand and smiled coldly. I am Xiao Hua of the Dao sect. How dare you, Xiao Hua? The old Confucian cultivator's face was clear, with a short gray beard under his chin. His square face could not hide his anger as he roared. Your Dao sect has long declined in the hidden Immortal continent. We, the Confucian cultivators, have not cut the weeds and eliminated the roots. You actually dare to provoke the bottom line of our Confucian cultivators. Are you not afraid that we will eradicate your Tao sect? Ha! Xiaohua laughed as if he had seen the most ridiculous thing in the world. He pointed his hand behind him and said, Yes, my Tao sect has long declined. Therefore, every Tao sect disciple lives with his tail between his legs. Even the disciples who have never cultivated dare not make a loud noise for fear of attracting the attention of the Confucian cultivators. Look at the Tao sect behind Xiaohua. I don't know if you know him. This old man has never known anyone from the Tao sect. This Confucian cultivator could be considered reasonable. He didn't immediately take action to deal with Xiaohua. However, his cold and lifeless face clearly showed his disdain for Taoist disciples. Yes, you are high and mighty, educating the students in this academy and showing your majesty. How could you know this respectable old man? This old man had never read poetry, nor did he enlighten the people. However, he had been giving out porridge at Seven Suns Temple for decades. He would rather starve himself so that the child beggars around him could fill their stomachs. It was such an adorable old man that he had died so tragically and was even said to have committed suicide. Suicide, suicide, you see, you die like this for Xiaohua to see. Xiaohua said and pointed his finger at the ruins of the gatehouse. Your academy hides filth, and the gatehouse has been contaminated with filth. How can it be worthy of the remains of my Tao sect master? If this Xiaohua does not push down this gatehouse, how can Master Tao Shan face the statue of your Tao sect saint? How can he state his grievances? Hiss. That Confucian cultivator was stunned and sucked in a breath of cold air. Finally, he looked at the people who had already surrounded him. He exchanged glances and looked at Xiaohua. Xiaohua, if you have any grievances, you can go to the Bronze Pillar State's government office to redress your grievances. Even if there are traitors in my academy who are involved in this matter, there should be a government office to investigate. You are only a Tao sect disciple. You have no right to interfere with the lives of others. You can't take revenge for this and push down the gatehouse of my academy. Moreover, this Taoist priest Tao Shan may be a kind person in your eyes, but that may not be the case in this old man's eyes. Although the Bronze Pillar State is not very rich, as long as one has a bit of strength, they will not starve, let alone become a beggar. It is because of people like Tao Shan who give them help that they don't need to pay, allowing them to reap without sowing, that they will have a lazy heart and not work, only knowing how to beg and be parasites. -12. Chapter 33-38. Xiaohua was originally burning with rage and wanted to vent his anger on the Imperial Academy. If this old man had attacked him the moment he came up, Xiaohua would not have shown mercy. Even if he did not take this old man's life, he would definitely not let this old man off. Although his cultivation was not the same as before, he had many methods available to him. It should be easy to deal with this old man. However, the old man did not directly attack. Even if the academy's gate was destroyed, he still suppressed his anger and wanted to get to the bottom of the matter. Of course, putting aside the truth, just this attitude and self-restraint caused Xiaohua's anger to lessen. Hee. Xiaohua laughed coldly. Isn't the Copper Pillar Imperial Academy from the Copper Pillar Imperial Academy? Since it was your academy's students who did evil, can the officials of the Copper Pillar Imperial Academy make a decision for a lonely Taoist disciple? I don't know if they can make a decision or not. The old man's expression did not relax at all. He said word by word. But I know that if you don't put the law in your eyes and do whatever you want, what will happen to the world? Bullying the weak with the strong, getting greedy with greed, living in a precarious state? Humph, I forgot that you are a Taoist disciple. Naturally, you don't know what law is. You only know how to do whatever you want and not put the rules in your eyes. What you said is reasonable, but I also want to follow the law. Xiaohua had already thought it through in his anger. But there are people who use the law as a plaything and do illegal things with the hat of the law. Since the law cannot be controlled, then I will use the heavenly Tao and enforce justice on behalf of the heavens. What right do you have to enforce justice on behalf of the heavens? What right do you have to treat human lives like grass? Whether I have the right or not is not for you to judge. But I know that the people who treat human lives like grass are your Academy's people. I will kill this Academy's people on the spot and redress the injustice of my Taoist disciple. Xiaohua retorted. I am too lazy to talk about the specifics. The officials have already caught up. You can investigate in detail. Now that I am going to send Master Dao Shan to the saint, please step aside. Xiaohua, you keep saying that it was my Academy's student who did evil. What is this student's name? Where is your evidence? Where are the witnesses and material evidence? The old man was enraged. You didn't know what was right or wrong and you destroyed my Academy's gate. How can my Academy let you off the hook today? Ha ha ha, what a good give up! I never thought that I would be able to give up today. The wishful steel rod in Xiaohua's hand shook, and he laughed. In the eyes of the government, what is the use of evidence? In the era where officials and bandits colluded, what evidence was there that they did not have? If I want to do something, why would I need to remove evidence? If I want to do something, I don't need any evidence. Then Xiaohua pointed the wishful steel staff at the sky and shouted. This Xiao naturally knows who that person is, but if this Xiao says it, can you guarantee that he won't escape? Do you promise to hand him over to me? The Academy is where the laws are. You Taoism cultivators don't have laws in your eyes, but the Academy must have them, the old man said indifferently. Even if you reveal the identity of that evil thief, my Academy will still hand him over to the authorities. It's not up to you to decide. Ha, in that case. Xiaohua's figure moved. Those who walk different paths cannot make plans together. This Xiao has already given your Academy enough face, so it doesn't make a difference. Get out of the way. In front of this Xiao, if a person blocks me, I will kill a person. If a city blocks me, I will kill a city. If a country blocks me, I will kill a country. The old man's nose was crooked with anger. Xiaohua had smashed their gate. This was a naked slap in the face, and Xiaohua actually said that he was giving them face. Xiaohua, don't you think you are too arrogant? Aren't you afraid that the wind will cut your tongue? The old man sneered. Don't you see that my Academy's thousands of students are already waiting? Do you want to rely on your own courage to challenge the order of my Academy? Ha, yes, my strength may be limited, but my laws are also limited. Xiaohua looked up to the sky and laughed. This laughter seemed to be too much today, which really made Xiaohua angry. The indignation in his heart was difficult to express. But I have righteousness in my heart that can soar to the 9 heavens. Even if there are thousands of people, I will still go. I am stronger than people like you who are bluffing, strong on the outside but weak on the inside. Before Xiaohua could finish his words, the old man's nose was already crooked with anger. After hearing these common words of Confucian cultivators, his body swayed, and his hand trembled slightly. Xiaohua, this old man knows that you have some Confucian cultivation, which is why I asked a few more questions. But you actually did not remember the grace of the Confucian cultivators in your heart, did not cultivate your character according to the etiquette of the Confucian cultivators, and even repaid kindness with enmity, and even slandered my Academy. Come, let this old man see what kind of cultivation you have. Don't talk about tolerance, don't talk about cultivation, everything is just delaying. Xiaohua sneered. Do you think this Xiao does not understand? Since you all are delaying, this Xiao can also delay. You and I are the same. You. The old man was so angry that his beard was trembling. At this moment, a loud sound like a drum came from the side of the Academy. A well-built cultivator holding a heavenly halberd in his hand flew over with a dozen youths, stepping on balls of clear light. Professor Hu, the entrance of my Imperial Academy has been smashed by someone. If you still have the heart, then why are you being so long-winded? Look at your side, what have you taught these brats to become? Each of them is listless and smacking their lips like slugs. Where is the aura of an academy? No wonder they are being bullied to the nose. Martial cultivator? Xiao Huan narrowed his eyes, thinking about what Fu Jiwen said at the auction, and looked at the man with interest. Vital energy surged around the muscular man, and an indescribable valiance emanated from the muscles on his arms. The heavenly halberd that was thicker than a fist made a whimpering sound as the muscular man flew, and it was quite frightening. The murderous intent in the muscular man's eyes was even more obvious. Xiao Hua looked down coldly, and suddenly his eyebrows twitched. He glanced in the direction of the academy, and his slightly worried heart relaxed. The wishful staff in his hand also swayed a few times. Professor Dong, my Imperial Academy has always been a place of virtue. This Taoist cultivator dares to provoke us, and look at the tragic death of the old man in the carriage. There must be something fishy going on. If I don't ask clearly, how can I act? Professor Hu's Confucian robe fluttered without wind, and his anger from before was slightly restrained. Moreover, the culprit who humiliated my academy and destroyed my sect is right in front of me. How can I let him escape? Noisy! Professor Dong flew closer, and his leopard eyes looked fiercely at Xiao Hua, and then looked at the gate that was destroyed by Xiao Hua. He shouted to stop Professor Hu's words, and pointed at Xiao Hua. You little brat, let me see what you are capable of. How dare you pluck the fur from the tiger's mouth? As he spoke, the so-called Professor Dong waved his thick left arm, and there was a fist-sized ring on his black furry arm. Roar! A tiger's roar suddenly sounded, and a gust of wind rolled up from where Professor Dong was standing. A 20 feet long, a few feet tall ferocious tiger appeared out of thin air, and demon clouds appeared between its 4 paws, and it pounced towards Xiao Hua. Xiao Hua looked down quietly, as if he was stunned, and did not see that the hungry tiger was already in front of him. Professor Hu, who was not far away, was reprimanded by Professor Dong, and he simply ignored it. He frowned slightly, and waved his hand. A Confucian scholar from afar hurriedly flew over, and Professor Hu whispered a few instructions. That Confucian scholar hurriedly flew down, and headed towards the 100 constables in the distance. Just as Professor Hu finished his instructions, Professor Dong's tiger pet pounced in front of Xiao Hua without any hindrance. The demonic wind was rampant, and it swept up dozens of feet around Xiao Hua. Its bloody mouth emitted a foul stench, and it bit towards Xiao Hua's upper body. It was as if it could bite Xiao Hua in half in the blink of an eye. While everyone was watching, Professor Dong suddenly had a bad feeling in his heart. However, in front of so many Confucian scholars, he could not shrink back, so he urged his body to rush over with the halberd in his hand. Evil creature! At this time, Xiao Hua seemed to have recovered, and with a light shout, his whole body was like a fallen leaf blown by the wind, leisurely floating, and extremely cleverly dodging the claws and bloody mouth of the hungry tiger. Even at the moment when his body missed, he casually swung the staff in his hand at the tiger's head. Woo! The sound of the wind was followed by a paw sound. Hungry tiger was hit by the staff, and blood burst out. He did not even have the chance to scream, and fell from the sky. Tabby cat! After hungry tiger, Professor Dong's figure naturally followed. He was already on the alert, but he never expected that hungry tiger would be killed by Xiao Hua's staff before he could even lift his sky piercer. Xiao Hua's attack was too ruthless, so ruthless that he found it hard to believe. So how could he bear it? After a sorrowful cry, a pale golden brilliance flashed around his body, and the halberd turned into thousands of golden lights, one by one, piercing towards Xiao Hua from all directions. Haha, this is my Dao sex method! You actually dare to make a fool of yourself in front of this old man! Xiao Hua laughed, and the staff grew longer. Under the wave, 10,000 methods were destroyed, and the shadow of the halberd like mountains and waves was defeated. It rushed towards Xiao Hua and turned into a huge halberd. Boom! There was another loud sound, and countless students and constables could not help but cover their ears. The expression on their faces was numb with shock and a trace of pain. Looking at Professor Dong's halberd, the moment it touched the staff, it had been broken into 2 pieces. Professor Dong's bones were soft, and his muscles were numb. He could not control his body and fell from the sky in an extremely embarrassing manner. What made Professor Dong feel ashamed was that although his body was weak as if struck by lightning, the true energy in his chest was still surging. Just as he was about to urge his true energy to fly out of thin air, there was a sharp pain in his mind, and he could not help but groan in a low voice. He held his head with his hands, and it was difficult for him to raise his true energy, and he quickly fell to the ground. Looking at the increasingly swollen green bricks and the gray ground clearly visible, Professor Dong's face could not help but turn red. -12. Chapter 33-39. You only have the strength of a second or third level elemental force, and you dare to be arrogant in front of me. Not only are you not afraid of losing face as a Confucian cultivator, you are also not afraid of losing your tongue? Xiao Hua's cold sarcasm entered Professor Dong's ears and made Professor Hu gasp again. He looked at Xiao Hua in disbelief. Yes, how could Professor Hu not know Professor Dong's strength? He was a famous fierce man in the Imperial Academy, and had a very powerful tiger pet. Normal Confucian cultivators would find it difficult to deal with him. However, such a fierce man was not even a match for Xiao Hua. Did that mean that Xiao Hua had the strength of a fourth or fifth level elemental force? However, on second thought, Professor Dong came to a realization. Xiao Hua's big stick technique was a body cultivator's Tao. He was truly the nemesis of Professor Dong, especially when Xiao Hua killed Hungry Tiger with his footwork and figure. It was clearly a profound martial art. However, Professor Dong's methods were not like this. Professor Hu did not understand why he did not have a backup plan. Get out of my way, I can't be bothered with you accomplices. I still have to go to the Imperial Academy to find the real culprit. Xiao Hua waved his hand and the Pegasus moved again, following behind Xiao Hua. That was just a warning. If you don't respect yourselves, it won't be your spiritual pets that die next time. I don't mind staining my hands with blood and using your blood as a sacrifice to my Taoist disciples. I will use your lives to make Master Dao Shan close his eyes. Professor Hu heard Xiao Hua's words and looked behind the Pegasus. On the broken carriage, Dao Shan's head drooped, and his eyes were frozen with fear and disbelief. He sighed in his heart, and rushed to Xiao Hua on his flying sword. For the first time, he clasped his hands and said, Xiao Hua, you can seek justice for your Taoist disciples. I also want to seek peace for my Confucian disciples. You have the courage to face thousands of people, and I also have the courage to break and not bend. Come, don't hold back. If you want to enter the Imperial Academy, you have to run over me. Hee hee. Xiao Hua laughed coldly and waved the wishful stick in his hand. He shouted, So what if I run over you? Today, I will trample all over your Imperial Academy and run over all your Confucian cultivators. I will not rest until I find the culprit. Professor Hu saw that Xiao Hua was not moved by his words at all. He looked around the academy and saw that it was already crowded. Not only were the students of the Imperial Academy waiting eagerly, even the villagers were crowding over. Their gazes were either filled with envy, eagerness, astonishment, or curiosity. If this was not the Imperial Academy, everyone would have cheered loudly. All of you can come at me together! Xiao Hua coldly looked at Professor Dong and the two people behind him. You are not my opponent! No need. Professor Hu shook his head slightly. Although you were able to defeat Dong Fei in one move, your strength is only at the second or third level of origin power. If all of us were to gang up on you, wouldn't we be bullying you with numbers? Up to you. Xiao Hua laughed coldly. If you don't want to bully me with numbers, why did you set up a formation in the Imperial Academy? Professor Hu turned his head to look at the main road of the academy. Indeed, there were hundreds of thousands of students standing in an orderly manner. Each of them was holding a brush and ink in their hands, or holding a scroll in their hands. They looked like they were ready for battle. He smiled bitterly and said, It is better to die in glory than to live in dishonor. Immortal Xiao has forced my Imperial Academy into a dead end. Every one of us is a member of the Imperial Academy. At this time, we naturally have to fight with our lives. 1 person is to kill, 100 people is to kill, 1,000 people is to kill. Xiao Hua waved the wishful stick in his hand and shouted. Then I will kill you first. Professor Hu, be careful. The two Confucian cultivators at the side hurriedly reminded Xiao Hua when they saw how fierce he was. The wishful stick was disrupting the surrounding noble spirit. The sword chi is in my chest, and the righteous spirit is in the heavens and earth. I sacrifice my body to the heavens and earth, and I am willing to use the noble spirit to shake the domain. Professor Hu let out a sorrowful cry. The sword chi around his body shone brightly. Thousands of noble spirit poured down like the Milky Way and rushed into Professor Hu's body. Then, it turned into a sword chi river and rushed towards Xiao Hua. It was the famous noble spirit river of the Confucian cultivators. Come on! Xiao Hua shouted. Without hesitation, he waved the wishful stick and rushed into the sword chi river. He said loudly, I am a pillar of the Tao sect. I am arrogant in the long river. Your noble spirit and sword chi river are not as long as my stick. The flying swords were like a river. It seemed that every wave in the surging river was a murderous sword intent. It seemed that every trace of sword light could pierce Xiao Hua. This vision suddenly made everyone's eyes flash with hope. Whether it was the secular people or the students of the academy, they all longed for this river-like flying swords to kill Xiao Hua, who had provoked the academy, and they did not doubt that Professor Hu had such means. Even though this river of flying swords was continuous and unending, and it was mixed with a righteous aura and possessed unrivaled courage, but in the eyes of a Taoist sect cultivator like Xiao Hua who'd witnessed the might of the sword transformation technique since a long time ago, it was truly insufficient. If Xiao Hua's magical power was still there, he was afraid that he would not have to pay attention to this sword chi river. He could have used the killing spirit Yuan light to instantly take Professor Hu's life. Or he could have used the thunder attracting technique. Thunder flow against the sword chi river, let's see who is stronger. Unfortunately, at this time, Xiao Hua could not use his Buddhist cultivation. He did not dare to reveal his devil realm cultivation method. The soul cultivation method was slightly weaker, so he could only use the wishful steel staff. Although there was only one wishful steel staff, Xiao Hua's hands danced. Balls of golden light flashed, like a pillar between heaven and earth that could not fall. No matter how many flying swords rushed over, they were all shattered one by one, turning into fireflies that disappeared in the wind. How is this possible? While everyone was shocked, Professor Hu was also astonished. My noble spirit river is condensed from noble spirit. Can ordinary iron actually hit it? Xiao Hua's hand, is it an immortal weapon? Yes, Professor Hu had only seen flying swords blocked by weapons. He had never seen any weapon from the hidden immortal continent that could block the noble spirit. Moreover, Xiao Hua's weapon did not have any magical power fluctuations. It seemed that he did not use any Taoist technique at all. Professor Hu was surprised. His momentum was weak, and his noble spirit was also slack. At this moment, Xiao Hua's Taoist robe flew again, and he roared, Eat this Zhao's staff! As he spoke, the wishful steel staff suddenly lengthened. Although Xiao Hua did not show any dharmakaya, the wishful steel staff fell like a mountain, shrouding the area around Professor Hu. The great spirit that was flowing in the air immediately solidified. In the eyes of everyone, Xiao Hua was no different from a god. Not good! Facing the wishful steel staff, Professor Hu's heart trembled. He hurriedly raised his hands, and dozens of sword lights flew out from his hands, turning into a sword net, trying to block the wishful steel staff. At the same time, he opened his mouth and spat out a mouthful of golden qi, which also turned into a small sword, catching up with the sword net first. Hiss, golden qi gathering. Xiao Hua did not understand the power of this small golden sword. He only felt that this small sword vaguely contained a kind of obscure fluctuation, which was more powerful than the sword cultivator's small sword or Emojianli's small sword. However, the students of the nearby college were all people who knew what was good for them. Someone had already cried out in surprise. Professor Hu has cultivated to the realm of golden qi gathering. Golden qi gathering? When Xiao Hua heard this, he immediately thought of the so-called 5Chi gathering. He unconsciously sneered. I don't care what golden Chi gathering is. Wood Chi gathering? Under my Dao sex magic, everything is illusory. Woo! The wishful steel staff did not slack off. Ka pa pa! Dozens of crisp sounds were heard, and the sword net was smashed into pieces. King! The sound of the sword resounded through the sky. The small sword of golden Chi gathering was still defeated under the force of the wishful steel staff. Although it was extremely dim by Xiaohua's attack, it was still able to escape from the wishful steel staff and rushed into Professor Hu's mouth. Professor Hu's face was ashen, and he could hardly stand still in the air. In particular, the wishful steel staff fell like a mountain, and he had already smelled the breath of death. Seeing that the shadow of the wishful steel staff had already shrouded him, Professor Hu suddenly felt the true Qi in his chest boiling, and a long-lost heroic spirit rushed into his heart. Although his body was like a withered branch swaying in the wind, his eyes were like an awl, looking straight at the falling wishful steel staff. He smiled and said, In my life, there is a beginning and an end. What joy is there in life? What fear is there in death? Grandma, I didn't want to kill you at all. Aren't you making me lose face by yelling like this? Xiaohua even had to find definite evidence to kill Wu Qian. How could he kill Professor Hu for no reason now? At this time, when he heard Professor Hu's words, he didn't know whether to laugh or cry. How could others understand Xiaohua's thoughts? The two Confucian cultivators next to Professor Hu were shocked and were about to urge their true Qi to save him. At this time, a clear voice sounded without the slightest bit of smoke and fire. Xiaohua, since you don't have the intention to kill, why are you so aggressive? This voice seemed to be in his ear, but if he listened carefully, it seemed to be in his heart, as if he was talking to himself. Xiaohua was shocked and unconsciously released his divine sense, shouting, Who is it? Who knew that there was no abnormality in the place where the divine sense passed, and the others didn't feel anything? Even Professor Hu was still facing death. How could Xiaohua not know that he had met a master? Hey, who said that I don't have the intention to kill? Xiaohua sneered and said, Today, I will let you see the thunderous means of my Dao sect. With that, the wishful steel staff, which had been somewhat stagnant, once again slammed down with the sound of wind and thunder. In this gap, everyone seemed to understand something, and they all exclaimed, as if they were worried about the fate of Professor Hu. AI. The voice sighed, and Xiaohua suddenly felt that there was a quagmire under his wishful steel staff. Although there was no great force, the seemingly endless winding force wrapped around the wishful steel staff. Looking at the other side of the college, a tall and thin figure similar to Xiaohua, wearing a blue robe, slowly flew over. -12. Chapter 3340. Oh! When Xiaohua saw the person appear, his divine sense immediately swept over again. Who would have thought that it was exactly the same as before? He couldn't see the person's shadow at all. Xiaohua was surprised and on guard. This Confucian cultivator was the first cultivator he had seen since he came to the hidden Immortal continent that he couldn't even detect with his divine sense. However, when Xiaohua squinted his eyes and saw the person clearly, the surprise in his heart became even stronger. Because the person's clothes were not only a rare light blue Confucian robe, but his hair was also strange. It was not the bun of Confucian and Dao cultivators, nor was it the bald head of a Buddhist monk. Instead, it was the kind of hair that was 3 inches long. Not only did it cover the forehead, but it also covered most of the eyebrows, almost close to the eyes. What made Xiaohua most uncomfortable was that the person's skin was white, his appearance was extremely handsome, and he had a childish baby face, far younger than the average Confucian scholar. In particular, his eyes were narrow and looked very small, but when he looked around, his sharp gaze was like a sword, and his lacquered eyes were like stars. Such a handsome figure made the conceited Xiaohua feel threatened. What kind of appearance did he have in the eyes of a group of female cultivators? Xiaohua didn't know how the person blocked his wishful steel staff, but he really didn't have the intention to kill Professor Hu. At this time, he took advantage of the situation and shrank the wishful steel staff to a length of a few feet. He waved it in front of his eyes and pointed it forward, coldly saying, "Where did this little boy come from? When the adults are talking, what right do you have to speak? Greetings, Minister!" Just as Xiaohua's voice fell, the group of Confucian cultivators and students all bowed and shouted in unison. Their voices were obviously much louder than usual. It was so noisy that Xiaohua's earwax fell a lot. "Humph!" Xiaohua sneered, the wishful steel staff in his hand retracted and resentfully carried it on his shoulder. He put a finger into his ear and said to himself, "It's just a stinky bag, what's the use? I'll beat you to death in a while and let you show off." Although the tone was full of threat, Xiaohua himself may not be able to hear the jealousy in the words. "Get up!" The judge flew closer. His starry eyes landed on Dao Shan's corpse, and then looked at the collapsed gatehouse. He waved his hand and said, "What happened? Why are the Dao sect's fellow immortals so angry?" Seeing that this judge was far from being as delicate as he looked, seeing that he didn't fly into a rage when the gatehouse was destroyed, and instead asked questions without the slightest bit of anger, Xiaohua sighed in his heart. He knew that he wouldn't be able to fight today. However, he didn't pay any attention to this judge. He glanced at him and didn't say anything. Xiaohua had already told him about Master Dao Shan's matter once, so there was no reason for him to waste his saliva again. "Honorable Judge!" Professor Hu hurriedly flew to the front and bowed respectfully. He recounted what Xiaohua said and what he did. Finally, he pointed to the constables on the ground and said, "I have already sent Professor Sun down to ask in detail. Now we have the answer." The judge nodded and swept his gaze. The so-called Professor Sun, who was ordered to go down, hurriedly flew up and was about to report in a low voice. Hu knew that the judge raised his hand and said, "Sun Xian, the Imperial Academy is the backbone of the Bronze Pillar Nation. We have always been the role model of righteousness. Every word and action of ours has to face the heavens and the earth. It's better to speak louder so that everyone can hear clearly and understand." "Yes, Honorable Judge, I understand." Sun Xian nodded and said loudly, "I am Sun Xian of the Imperial Academy. I have just asked the constables of the Yamen. Just today, in the Seven Suns Temple at Shiluo Ridge, 21 Taoists died for unknown reasons. Constable Wu Qian received the news and brought Coroner Zhuo Hong and 20 other constables to the Seven Suns Temple. After the coroner's investigation, other than Dao Shan, there were 20 other Taoists. Their hands were all strangling their own necks. The finger marks on their necks were exactly the same as their own fingers. There were no other fatal injuries. The other constables checked the surroundings of the Seven Suns Temple and did not find any traces of outsiders entering the Seven Suns Temple. Furthermore, no one heard any special sounds from the Seven Suns Temple last night. Therefore, Constable Wu Qian ruled out the possibility of homicide. His initial guess was that the Seven Suns Temple was invaded by evil spirits during the night of the Shongyuan festival. These 21 Taoists were possessed by evil spirits and strangled themselves to death. When Constable Wu Qian arrived at the Seven Suns Temple, other than the corpses of the 21 Taoists, there were 4 other Taoists and a Confucian scholar. However, Constable Wu Qian did not see any traces of the 5 of them spending the night at the Seven Suns Temple. Furthermore, from what the 5 of them said, they participated in the auction at the Zhai Xing Lu of the Bright Moon Lane. Therefore, the 5 of them were also ruled out as suspects. At this point, Sun Xian looked at Xiaohua again. He hesitated slightly before continuing. Just as Constable Wu Qian was about to report this matter to the magistrate, and asked the authorities to investigate again, Xiaohua of this Dao sect suddenly descended from the sky and had a verbal conflict with Constable Wu Qian. However, Constable Wu Qian did not mind. He only explained his judgment and the situation at the Seven Suns Temple to Xiaohua. At that time, Xiaohua did not say anything and left with the 4 Taoists and the Confucian scholar. Constable Wu Qian originally wanted to keep the 6 of them. However, Considering that the 6 of them were indeed at the Zhai Xinglu when Dao Shan died and this matter had already been confirmed by the Zhai Xinglu, he did not stop them. He only ordered his subordinates to hurry back to the prefectural magistrate to report this matter while he stayed in the Seven Sons Temple to prevent any abnormalities from happening. In just half a meal's time, Xiaohua returned with a stone pillar that was over 100 feet tall in his hand. Not only did he kill Constable Wu Qian, Coroner Zhuahong, Constables Wang Tingwei, Zhang Chang, and Su Hongxi, he even destroyed the entire murder scene at the Seven Sons Temple. Dao Shan's corpse was brought here by him, and the corpses of the other 20 Taoists were buried in the Seven Sons Temple. Currently, the main hall of the Seven Sons Temple had been destroyed and a blood stele that was about a foot tall stood there. On it was written, "This is the land of the Taoists. Those who are not good should not enter. Otherwise, kill without mercy." Xiaohua of the Taoists. After he finished speaking, Sun Xian looked at the institute judge and said seriously, "This is what I heard from the officials. I dare not add another word to it. I hope the institute judge can retract it." The institute judge waved his hand and said plainly, "I understand. You may leave." After Sun Xian moved to the side, the institute judge looked at Xiaohua and said, "Fellow Immortal Xiao, did you hear it clearly?" Xiaohua laughed coldly. "It's not like I don't have ears. How can I not hear it clearly? What was the reason for you to return and kill?" The institute judge asked curiously, "Could it be that you have found out something in this half a meal's time? Since you have found out something, you should have reported it to the prefectural magistrate. Why did you kill him privately? Who are you?" Xiaohua retorted, "I have told you the truth. Can you redress the grievances of the Taoists? Can you hand over the real culprit hidden in the academy to me? I am the institute judge of the Imperial Academy, Du Ming. My courtesy name is Shan Jun. You can call me Professor Du." The institute judge replied word by word, "If you have solid evidence that can convince me, and even the students and Confucian scholars present, I can naturally arrest anyone in the academy and hand them over to the officials. However, you are not an official and cannot replace the laws of the Bronze Pillar country. Therefore, I cannot hand that person over to you." Xiaohua looked at Du Shan's handsome face and suddenly thought of Zhang Qixiao. He really doubted that there was anyone in the human race who could give birth to such a child. When he heard Du Shan Jun's question, he replied plainly, "Professor Du. Professor Du. All right, since you claim to be a professor and not an institute judge, then I will give you face. Previously, I have already promised in front of Master Dao Shan and the 20 Taoists that I will personally kill the real culprit. Now that you have promised, I will believe you this time. I hope you will not disappoint me. Thank you for your trust, fellow Immortal Xiao." Professor Du straightened his back and pointed to the surroundings. There are no less than 1,000 people in front of the academy. There are students of the Imperial Academy, people from the officials, and most of them are ordinary citizens. The teacher once said guarding against the mouths of the people is more important than guarding against the river. When the river collapses, many people will be hurt, and so will the people. As long as you tell the truth, even if I wanted to cover up my embarrassment, I would still have to consider the mouths of the crowd. Even if I don't care about my reputation, the Imperial Academy still cares about our reputation. We, the Confucian cultivators, still care about our reputation. All right. Before Xiaohua could open his mouth, hundreds of women and girls screamed at the same time. Xiaohua didn't know when they had gathered under Professor Dou's body. Each and every one of them had a dazed look in their eyes, as if Professor Dou could make them take off their pants with just a smile. Xiaohua looked at him in annoyance and said, "This Xiao just came to Copper Pillar Country last night, and hung out at Seven Sons Monastery in Shiluo Mountain Range. Because this Xiao wanted to participate in Zhai Xinglu's auction, I only saw Great Master Dao Shan at Seven Sons Monastery. I immediately brought a few Taoists to Bright Moon Lane. When I returned to the Seven Sons Temple this morning, the tragedy had already happened. Before I could ask how Master Dao Shan died, Wu Qian said that Master Dao Shan and the rest strangled themselves to death. Who would believe such a ridiculous conclusion?" Furthermore, Master Dao Shan and the rest strangled themselves to death. They had hands. But what about the horses that I brought with me? Did they also use their hooves to strangle themselves to death? Boom! The group of students did not speak, but the villagers roared with laughter. Yes, the villagers knew more about livestock than the students. Not to mention that the hooves of the horses could not be used as hands. Even if they had hands, the neck of the horses was so big that it was impossible for them to be strangled to death. I already felt that Wu Qian's words were strange, but I still chose to believe it. Xiaohua said innocently. That was why I wanted to leave with the few Taoists. When I left the Seven Suns Temple, I met someone who knew about it. -12. Chapter 33:41. Who is this person? Why didn't Immortal Xiao bring him along? Professor Dou frowned and asked. Humph, why should I bring him along? So that you can silence him? Xiaohua laughed coldly. This person didn't say much, he only said that he saw someone enter the Seven Suns Temple in the dark, and he vaguely saw Wu Qian nearby. You returned to kill Wu Qian just based on this? Professor Dou was even more dissatisfied. Xiaohua laughed coldly again. Do you think I'm that kind of person? If that's the case, I should have searched Wu Qian's soul when I saw him. Searched Wu Qian's soul? You searched Wu Qian's soul? Professor Dou's expression changed. That's right, if I didn't search Wu Qian's soul, how would I know that he knowingly broke the law and brought a few constables to the Seven Suns Temple? If I didn't search Wu Qian's soul, how would I know that he broke the law and accepted Jiang Wenhao's bribe to give the West Conk Ridge to the Jiang family? If I didn't search Wu Qian's soul, how would I kill Wu Qian, Zhuahong, Wang Tingwei, Zhang Chang and Su Hongxi? Why didn't I kill the other constables at the Seven Suns Temple? If I didn't search Wu Qian's soul, how would I dare to bring Master Dao Shan's corpse to the Bronze Pillar Academy? Xiaohua's every word shook the surroundings. Every word caused the faces of the students to change. After he finished speaking, not to mention the hundreds of villagers who were stirred up, even the students looked as if they were about to die. That's right, Xiaohua was a Taoist disciple, and a weakling in the hidden Immortal continent. If he didn't have such solid evidence, how would he dare to provoke the Confucian Academy? If he didn't know the filth within, how would he dare to bring Master Dao Shan's corpse to the Imperial Academy? But if what Xiaohua said was true, this would be a huge humiliation to the Bronze Pillar Imperial Academy. Not only would the Academy be destroyed by Xiaohua for nothing, but its countless years of reputation would also be destroyed. Sigh. Professor Dou sighed and shook his head. Immortal Xiao, you are too reckless. Even if Wu Qian and the rest are guilty, the Bronze Pillar country's magistrate should be the judge. You have no right to disregard human life, you should report it to the government. Especially, who knows if you search Wu Qian's soul? Who knows if you're telling the truth? We don't have the testimony of Wu Qian and the others either. You have no evidence, so how can this old man and the others say anything? Haha, Bronze Pillar State Magistrate. What a big government! Xiaohua laughed heartily. Not just the governor of the Copper Pillar State, even if it's the Copper Pillar State, even if it's the Yu Province, even if it's the entire hidden Immortal continent, none of them are worthy of this Zhao's report. Perhaps you have the right to be arrogant. Professor Dou didn't mention the shortcomings of the Taoist sections. Instead, he explained, however, the Seven Suns Temple is in my Bronze Pillar Nation. Wu Qian is also a subordinate of the Bronze Pillar Nation's magistrate. This matter has to go through the magistrate. Dou Shanjun. Xiaohua sneered. This Xiao thinks highly of you and has already given you face by telling you the cause of the matter, as well as the name of the real culprit. Why are you not going to arrest Jiang Wenhao, but are here to argue with this Xiao about Wu Qian's death? Could it be that you want to arrest this Xiao and bring him to justice? Jiang Wenhao is the descendant of a Confucian family in the Bronze Pillar Nation. He is also a well-known figure in the Imperial Academy. Even I have heard of him. Professor Dou replied plainly. Therefore, you don't have to worry. The monk can run away, but the temple can't. At this point, Professor Dou grinned and mocked himself. Those words are blasphemous to the Buddhist sections. I hope that the eminent monks of the Buddhist sects will not take it to heart. Wow! Another group of women exclaimed. They were obviously very satisfied with Do Shanjun's modesty. If you have something to say it quickly. Don't pretend to be profound. Xiaohua was even more unhappy as he said coldly. Professor Do didn't mind and smiled. What I mean is that Immortal Xiao doesn't have to worry about Jiang Wenhao escaping. Even if he escapes, there is still the Jiang family. If he really did such evil deeds, not to mention me, even the Imperial Academy will not let the Jiang family off. Good. Xiaohua clapped his hands and praised. Just based on what you said, I will temporarily let go of the Imperial Academy's teacher statue. Professor Do's face turned slightly cold when he heard this. He said with conviction, I will definitely give you an answer regarding Jiang Wenhao. But what about the Imperial Academy's gate? How are you going to give me and the Imperial Academy an answer? Is the dean the dean? Xiaohua suddenly asked. Professor Do was stunned and replied casually, Of course not. If you are not the dean, why should I give you an answer? Xiaohua laughed. After the Jiang Wenhao incident, you can consider this matter again. Hee. Professor Do laughed coldly. I would like to see how you are going to give the Imperial Academy an answer, how you are going to give the Confucian cultivators an answer. After he finished speaking, Do Shanjun raised his voice and asked, Where is Jiang Wenhao? When Xiaohua mentioned Jiang Wenhao, there were already scholars in the Imperial Academy who sent out students to look for him. Xiaohua had already released his soul awareness and locked on to this person. Just as Xiaohua expected, when Jiang Wenhao heard that the Imperial Academy's gate was smashed and that Xiaohua had brought Dao Shan's corpse to look for him, he panicked and ran out of the Imperial Academy in a hurry. However, he only left for a short while before he turned back. After he turned back, his expression was much calmer. Obviously, it was as Professor Do said. Even if Jiang Wenhao ran away, the Jiang family of the Copper Pillar Nation would not be able to escape. Instead of panicking, it was better to face it calmly. Xiaohua saw how panicked Jiang Wenhao was and was already confident. Therefore, he was not worried that he would not be able to give the Confucian cultivators and the Imperial Academy an answer. Not long after, Jiang Wenhao came in a hurry with a scholar. Looking at the handsome man whom he had already seen at the academy last night, Xiaohua despised him from the bottom of his heart. What a waste of such a good appearance! That's right, this Jiang Wenhao was the scholar that Xiaohua had seen before, the scholar that was proficient in Shi Wen Zhong, the scholar that used a brush to add the finishing touches to the lotus lantern. Even at this moment, the two whiskers at the corners of the scholar's mouth were still slightly curled up. Those seemingly ordinary eyes were still deep and profound. Although flying in the air and standing next to Professor Do somewhat obscured his elegance, it seemed that the two of them complemented each other, making them even brighter for a moment. Student greets Dean Do! Jiang Wenhao bowed to Do Shanjun and said respectfully. Professor Do smiled and waved his hand. Stand up! Do you know the reason why I asked you to come here today? Yes, I have already heard about it. Jiang Wenhao nodded and looked at Xiaohua. This Taoist senior may have misunderstood. I have some dealings with Wu Qian from the government. However, because of family matters, it did not involve any personal relationship. Furthermore, the Seven Sons Temple in Shilua Ridge is a property of the Taoist sect. As a Confucian cultivator, how could I go there? As for what Senior Xiao said about murdering old man Dao Shan and occupying the property of Shilua Ridge, that is even more false. My Jiang family is also a Confucian family and is famous in the Bronze Pillar country. How could I do such a thing? After saying that, Jiang Wenhao turned to Professor Do and said, Dean, Senior Xiao may have been too angry. This student doesn't dare to blame the senior. As for what is right and wrong, I hope Dean can make the decision and clear my name. Where were you last night? Professor Do asked directly. This? Jiang Wenhao was terrified and hurriedly bowed. I am in the wrong. Please punish me. Humph? Professor Do's face turned cold and said in a low voice. If you have committed such a crime, how can I forgive you? Jiang Wenhao hurriedly smiled and said, "Even if you give me 10 times the courage, I would not dare to do such a bad thing. Last night I—" At this point, Jiang Wenhao clenched his teeth as if he was going to throw caution to the wind. He said in a low voice, "Last night, after I added the finishing touch to the lotus lantern, I went to the Red Chamber with 3 to 5 friends." "Red House?" Professor Doe frowned and immediately understood. Although his face showed embarrassment, he was obviously relieved. He shouted, "Tell me, who did you go with?" "Yes." Jiang Wenhao's face was flushed red as he said a few names. Following Jiang Wenhao's voice, a few young students also flew into the air from within the academy, their faces abnormally red with embarrassment. "Humph!" Professor Doe snorted and said, "You all can leave. From today onwards, don't do your homework. Wait until this matter is over and I punish you." "Yes." Jiang Wenhao and the others bowed and were about to leave. Xiao Hua narrowed his eyes and coldly looked at Jiang Wenhao's performance. Only now did he open his mouth and said, "Wait. Jiang Wenhao, let me ask you, do you know Kong Li Feng, Quan Chong, Ji Miao, and Lu Wujie?" Jiang Wenhao, who was already about to leave, clearly trembled. But when he turned his head, his face was filled with surprise and bewilderment. He said to Xiao Hua, "Senior Xiao, this student naturally knows these 4 people. They are the martial masters that I temporarily hired a few days ago for the Jiang family's matter. Furthermore, last night, the student had terminated his employment with them. Oh, that's right, I also have the contract that was drawn up 2 months ago. If Senior does not believe me, I can let the dean take a look." Jiang Wenhao emphasized the words, "temporarily hired," and "terminated my employment," very clearly. Then, he took out a piece of paper from his bosom and handed it to Professor Doe. Taking advantage of the time when Professor Doe opened the contract, Jiang Wenhao respectfully said to Xiao Hua, "Senior Xiao, Dao Shan's death and the tragedy at Seven Suns Monastery made me feel grief and indignation. However, even if the real culprits were Kong Li Feng, Quan Chong, Ji Miao, and Lu Wujie, it has nothing to do with me. Oh, let's take a step back. Even if I didn't coincidentally terminate my contract with these 4 martial masters yesterday, it is still their own actions and has nothing to do with me. If Senior wants to find someone, you should find them." -12. Chapter 33-42. Xiao Hua could not be bothered to talk to this beast in human face. He ignored Jiang Wenhao's humility and waited quietly for Dou Shanjun to finish reading the contract. As expected, Professor Dou waved the contract in his hand and said calmly, "Immortal Xiao, I have finished reading the contract and did not miss a single word. The 4 people that you mentioned have indeed terminated their employment with Jiang Wenhao. Just as Jiang Wenhao said, even if they killed the 21 people from the Seven Suns Temple, it had nothing to do with Jiang Wenhao. The most important thing is that Jiang Wenhao was not at the Seven Suns Temple last night but at the Red Spectre House. If you do not believe me, I will send someone to call the manager of the Red Spectre House over and ask him to testify." "No need." Xiao Hua coldly glanced at the seemingly innocent Jiang Wenhao and pointed at the wishful staff in his hand. "Professor Dou, this Xiao will ask you one last time. Can you hand this guy over to this Xiao?" "Impossible." Dou Shanjun took a step forward and stood in front of Jiang Wenhao. He replied calmly, "Jiang Wenhao is a student of the Imperial Academy. I cannot hand him over to you just because of a false accusation. Now that Jiang Wenhao has proven his innocence, I naturally have the obligation to protect his safety." "Ha!" Xiao Hua laughed and pointed at the statue of the teacher in the distance. "Since you all want to protect him, don't blame me for being ruthless. I will bring the remains of Master Dao Shan and kill my way to the statue of the saint. I will ask him personally, how did he educate the students of the Imperial Academy, and how he will give me a satisfactory answer." Although Xiao Hua looked confident, he was a little worried. Since Dou Shanjun was a judge of the Imperial Academy, his strength was at least at the level of a scholar, which was equivalent to a level 3 or level 4 elemental energy. It was similar to the Taoist sect's advanced Aurous core stage or nascent soul stage. Now that Xiaohua lacked methods, his overall strength was inferior to Dou Shanjun. Xiaohua did not have the confidence to win against Professor Dou. At this moment, Professor Dou furrowed his brows and coldly said, "Xiaohua, I respect you for daring to challenge the Imperial Academy over the death of an old man. However, this does not mean that the Imperial Academy can be bullied by anyone. The sequence of events has already been made clear. This matter has nothing to do with the Imperial Academy. If you continue to cause trouble like this, you're really doing it on purpose. I can't help but suspect your motives. Furthermore, I will not allow you to barge into the Imperial Academy again. It doesn't matter if you doubt me or not. This Zhao's motive is the same as the truth of this tragedy. There is only one reason. All the flowery words and all the excuses will not be able to cover up the truth." Xiaohua waved his hand and the Pegasus let out a long neigh. It spread its wings and followed Xiaohua step by step towards the Imperial Academy. "How dare you!" Professor Dou let out a furious roar. Instantly, the noble spirit within a 3-meter radius around him exploded. Hundreds of hurricanes whizzed out in all directions like tiny pythons. "Woo!" Xiaohua faced it directly. The fierce wind column was like the tail of a poisonous snake hitting his body. Xiaohua did not even lift the wishful staff. He just walked forward lazily with his hands folded. The professor's probing method was really not enough for Xiaohua. Dao Sect's methods are indeed impressive. Professor Dou's slender eyes became even more slender. He raised his hand and said loudly, "Students! Previously, when Dao Sect's immortal friends came to barge into the Imperial Academy, before we figured out the reason, we could not act rashly. We could not bully them with numbers. Now, everything has come to light. Dao Sect's immortal friends still want to barge into the Imperial Academy. This is a provocation to the Imperial Academy, a provocation to the Confucian cultivators. Therefore, we must work together to resist the Dao Sect's invasion. Listen to my command, 100-seed book array. Spread the name of the Imperial Academy and protect the legacy of the Confucian cultivators." Yes. After Professor Dou, the students who were lined up neatly in the Imperial Academy shouted in unison. Then, they waved their hands. Some of them held scrolls, some of them held ink brushes and started to recite poems. In an instant, rays of green light flashed above their heads. First, they condensed into words. Then, they attracted each other and condensed into lines of poems. When there were more poems, they formed into articles. These articles hovered above the Imperial Academy. Along with the chanting of the students, not only did they make sonorous sounds, but they also absorbed a lot of noble spirit and caused the green light to shine. Rise. After Professor Dou gave the order, he raised both of his hands and opened his 10 fingers slightly. A very strange force was produced from his hands, urging the noble spirit. It was as if the hand of a nascent soul was pinching towards Xiaohua. How can such a weak force be a match for Xiaohua? Although Xiaohua was very puzzled by this strange force, since it was similar to the hand of a nascent soul, why would Xiaohua be afraid? He sneered and still flew up. He waved the wishful staff in his hand and shattered the hand formed by the noble spirit. Professor Dou's face became serious again. His body flashed with a spiral vortex and countless noble spirit rushed into his body. Then, layers of green brilliance were produced from the soles of his feet and rushed to the middle dantian in his chest. Poof! Professor Dou's face flashed with green light. He opened his mouth and spat out a mouthful of green gas from his mouth. A particle the size of a thumb rushed out. Wood essence gathering! Wood essence gathering! Although Xiaohua didn't understand, the group of girls who worshipped Dou Shanjun were obviously very familiar with Professor Dou, and had already shouted crazily. Wood essence gathering! Xiaohua's eyes were bright, staring at the seed that seemed to be condensed from wood essence. He was very curious about what this wood essence gathering would do. Buzz! The dark green seed let out a rumbling sound. It was like a magic treasure, and countless noble qi in the surroundings rushed towards the seed. The more noble spirit there was, the brighter the seed became. Then, it unexpectedly grew in midair and turned into a sapling. In the blink of an eye, the sapling swelled again and a python-like vine appeared in front of Xiaohua. Ha ha ha, so it's like this! Xiaohua laughed and waved his hand almost without hesitation. More than 10 fire talismans rushed towards the sapling like moths to a flame. Humph! Dou Shanjun sneered. Around the vine, a layer of strange isolation appeared in an instant, trying to block the fire talismans outside of the vine. Explode! Xiaohua laughed and activated the spell in his hand. Boom, boom, boom! Several fire talismans turned into huge fireballs and shattered Professor Dou's defense in the blink of an eye. Professor Dou obviously didn't expect Xiaohua's fire talismans to be so powerful. He was shocked and hurriedly urged the vine to move. It had to be said that Professor Dou was the dean of the Imperial Academy. His strength was obvious to all. Just as Xiaohua's fire talismans broke through the defense, the vines that were previously as thick as an arm had turned into huge vines that were almost 10 feet long. They were like hundreds of violent horned dragons, baring their fangs and claws as they pounced towards Xiaohua. One could imagine, in the eyes of the thousands of students and villagers, these hundreds of huge vines had completely covered the sky above the Imperial Academy. What an arrogant abijna this was! And the target of these terrifying vines was the skinny little Taoist cultivator. Although this little cultivator's Taoist robe was already fluttering in the wind, although this little cultivator's hair was already blown up, he had the heavenly horse behind him and Dao Shan who was staring at this world with his head drooping. This little cultivator had no other choice but to use the wishful rod to challenge this huge monster. Explode, explode, explode! Seeing the countless huge vines pressing down on him, Xiaohua was not afraid. He chanted a few incantations and the remaining fire talismans exploded around the huge vines. Boom, boom! Although the huge python was formed from the noble qi, it was still condensed from the wood qi. Under Xiaohua's fire talismans, it was still blown up and even burned. Seeing this, Xiaohua couldn't help but be delighted. He understood that he no longer had any worries when facing Professor Dou, who was a Confucian cultivator who used the wood qi. Any fire element spell could catch him off guard. Sure enough, Dou Shanjun's expression changed drastically. He hurriedly opened his mouth and blew. A strong gust of wind rushed towards the burning areas. What was strange was that this gust of wind actually blew the fireballs out of the fire talismans until they were on the verge of collapse. Hee hee! You think I'm bragging? Xiaohua sneered. Even if you can brag to the heavens, you still won't be able to stop this Xiao from smashing your so-called wood essence into the heavens today. Following Xiaohua's mocking voice, hundreds of fire talismans appeared around the wooden vines out of thin air. With a rumbling sound, they exploded and ignited the entire wooden vines from head to toe. You! Professor Dou was now in the same state as Professor Hu. He was trembling in anger because of Xiaohua. He clearly felt that Xiaohua's strength was not higher than his and was even much weaker. However, Xiaohua's strength was extremely great, and the wishful rod was strange. His methods were unable to restrain it. Now that he had taken out the wood qi, it was completely restrained by Xiaohua's fire talismans. What was more special was that his wooden vines were about to be burned up and the wooden vines had not even hit Xiaohua. Xiaohua did not even have the slightest bit of Xiaohua's mana. What about me? I'm also very handsome, Xiaohua said and flew forward for a while. He was about to reach the gate of the Imperial Academy. Forget it, Professor Dou sighed. He opened his mouth and a ray of light rushed into the fire. Then, as the light retracted, a seed the size of a thumb was swallowed into Professor Dou's stomach. Following that, Professor Dou hurriedly retreated into the sky above the Imperial Academy. Over there, thousands of students were reciting poems and books. They had already covered the entire Imperial Academy like layers of a green net. Fu Yun! Dou Shanjun fell into the middle of the words and immediately started reciting. His recitation was very strange. At the beginning, it was only one voice. But in a moment, it seemed to have an accent. After a few breaths, the accent became even more serious. It was as if 100 mouths were reciting at the same time. -12. Chapter 33-43. However, this was not the only strange thing. Do Shan Jun's recitation was different from the other students' recitation. The essays did not fly out and merge with the other essays. Instead, they rushed to the top of Do Shan Jun's head and gradually condensed. What kind of divine ability is this? Xiao Hua was somewhat astonished. This is the 100-seed chorus. Just when Xiao Hua did not know how to deal with it, a voice came from Xiao Hua's right hand. Fu Jiwen? Xiao Hua frowned and looked over. Sure enough, Fu Jiwen, who had just sent Xiao Jian and the others out of Copper Pillar State, was standing on a magic cloud and flying over. He shouted, "Fellow Taoist Xiao, this is the 100-seed chorus of my Confucian cultivator. It is very powerful. I'm afraid you are not his opponent. Let's see how I deal with it." AI, Xiao Hua sighed and smiled bitterly. Little friend Fu, since you left, why did you come back? Don't you feel that you are a burden? I appreciate fellow Taoist Zhao's good intentions, Fu Jiwen said while flying. I also know why you asked me to send the 3 Taoists out of the city. However, Fu Jiwen pointed at Dao Shan's remains and said heavily, Great Master Dao Shan did good for his entire life. Today, he actually ended up in such a miserable state. This is the injustice of heaven and earth, the tragedy of human relationships. Fellow Taoist Xiao, you are a disciple of the Tao sect. Naturally, you have to seek justice for your disciples. However, in this world, you are not the only one who has a heart that seeks justice. I came back today to tell you that other than you, there is also me, and even other Taoists who heard about this matter have the intention to seek justice for Great Master Dao Shan. However, their strength is shallow and they have the heart but not the strength. Since I have some strength and admire Great Master Dao Shan, why can't I help fellow Taoist? Ha ha ha! Xiao Hua heard this and laughed unconsciously. He clapped his hands 3 times and said, My Tao is the Tao of heaven. My path is the path to heaven. From today onwards, my Tao is not alone. Unfortunately, Fu Jiwen did not understand the meaning of Xiao Hua's words. He only flew in front of Xiao Hua and looked at Do Shan Jun with a serious expression. In the blink of an eye, Do Shan Jun's chants formed into countless articles, and these articles actually condensed into a human figure above his head. However, this figure was extremely blurry and only had a silhouette. This is a child, Fu Jiwen said solemnly. You can control the noble spirit, and you can also control the words. In your hands, these words can kill people. As Fu Jiwen spoke, his body also flashed with clear light. Inscriptions gushed out from the surface of his body. First, they condensed into simple armor on his body. Then, under Fu Jiwen's control, they turned into thousands of tadpoles that floated in the air nearby. This is a type of formation. Xiao Hua was a formation grandmaster. When he saw the inscriptions on the armor connecting with each other and absorbing the noble spirit, he immediately had a plan and thought in surprise. With my will, with the heart of a child, 100 articles, intimidate the evil. Professor Do's 100 mouths suddenly sounded in unison. Sure enough, 100 articles flashed with green light and flew out from the mountain of literature, landing in front of the child. The blurry child opened its mouth and said, Suppress. What? The 100 articles were like 100 large nets, dragging a myriad of noble qi as they fell towards Fu Jiwen and Xiao Hua. Each article had several hundred sentences, and each sentence had a dozen words. The 100 articles had several tens of thousands of words, and all of them emitted a kind of unparalleled suppressive force. It was even more majestic than a mountain as it rushed down, as if it wanted to crush Xiao Hua and Fu Jiwen into meat paste. 36 Heavenly Dipper Words Soul Formation. Break for me. Fu Jiwen saw such a big formation and his expression changed slightly. However, his eyes were filled with determination. He shouted and raised his hands. The floating inscriptions on the armor immediately flashed, and turned into 36 huge inscriptions that Xiao Hua had never seen before, rushing towards the child. Eh? It's a bit strange. Xiao Hua was originally observing the flaws of the 100 articles, but when he suddenly saw Fu Jiwen turn the 36 heavenly dipper words soul formation into 36 inscriptions that he had never seen before, he couldn't help but be shocked. However, the 36 heavenly dipper words that attracted his attention actually gave birth to a fierce intent. They were even sharper than the simple inscriptions from before. Boom! A series of explosions sounded like firecrackers. When the 36 heavenly dipper words collided with the 100 articles of the child, the articles were smashed into pieces. Many of the articles were rearranged and turned into words, and these words were absorbed by the heavenly dipper words. Damn it, I underestimated this Fu Jiwen. Xiao Hua was pleasantly surprised. This guy really has some skill. Unfortunately, before Xiao Hua could be happy for a moment, the child, above Dou Shan Jun's head, said again, "Suppress." Following these two words, another 100 articles fell. "Student surnamed Fu." Dou Shan Jun's voice sounded. "This one understands your intentions, but you should know that you are only a single person. How many articles can you read in your lifetime? As for my child, they are all excellent articles at your fingertips. Every article will consume a lot of your energy. The child's articles are endless, but will your energy be exhausted? My life has a limit, but my learning is endless. I don't want to read all the books in the world, I only want to memorize the Song of Righteousness." Fu Jiwen was not afraid in the slightest. "If I don't read the Song of Righteousness, even if my life is endless, even if I read all the books in the world, what can I do?" Rumble. As he spoke, the 100 articles fell again, but this time, Fu Jiwen's heavenly dipper word soul formation fruit couldn't withstand it, and the words fell apart. However, Fu Jiwen clenched his teeth and raised his hands. Once again, 36 inscriptions appeared. However, these inscriptions were different from the ones before. Seeing Fu Jiwen's deathly pale face, Xiao Hua's gaze swept over the newly formed inscriptions. As if he was suddenly enlightened, he said, "Damn it, this old man understands. Isn't this the green seal script of soul cultivators? Isn't this method of Confucian cultivators just some bullshit word shaking the universe? This is copying other soul cultivators' methods." Xiao Hua had just woken up when the 36 inscriptions controlled by Fu Jiwen were immediately smashed to pieces by Professor Du's harmonious cry of the 100 children. This was even more thorough than before. Those inscriptions didn't even have time to flicker with splendor before they were smashed into righteous qi. Pff. Fu Jiwen spat out a mouthful of blood essence from his mouth. His figure swayed slightly, and he became dispirited in midair. Seeing this, Xiao Hua said in a clear voice, "Little friend Fu, you should step back first. Sit on the Pegasus and rest. Just look at this Xiao." "Sorry." Hearing Xiao Hua's call, Fu Jiwen turned his head. His face was pale gold, and he said with a wry smile, "Fellow Taoist Xiao should look for an opportunity to escape. You and I'm afraid we aren't their match." However, before Fu Jiwen could finish his words, Xiao Hua suddenly felt that between heaven and earth, there was a sudden deathly silence, and then endless sounds of reading could be heard. The sound of reading was originally loud and clear, but in just a moment, it turned into a clamor. Moreover, this clamor became louder and louder, covering all the sounds in the world. Even if Xiao Hua saw Fu Jiwen opening his mouth to say something, he couldn't hear a single word clearly. Sound attack? Xiao Hua smiled faintly, and used his finger to point at the Pegasus, indicating for Fu Jiwen to come forward. Just as Fu Jiwen flew towards the Pegasus, thousands of sounds filled Xiao Hua's ears like buzzing flies, and even rushed into Xiao Hua's heart through his ears. What was special was that a kind of soaring heroic spirit was born from his heart, and a feeling of blood gushing out from his blood vessels at the same time. Humph. Do you have any other methods? Xiao Hua sneered. If it was in the past, he might have been worried about this kind of sound attack, but at this moment, he had already cultivated the Devil Realm's cultivation method, and had already begun to refine his devil blood. How could the control of his blood vessels be compared to that of a Confucian cultivator? There was no need for Xiaohua to take the initiative to defend himself. The feeling of blood gushing out had only just appeared, and with a little circulation of his devil technique, it immediately disappeared. Although Fu Jiwen was very helpless in his heart, he was now seriously injured. Not to mention that the inscriptions on the outside of his body had already dimmed, and could only protect a limited area. Even the inside of his middle dantian was a mess. Fu Jiwen's middle dantian was different from that of an ordinary Confucian cultivator. Although it was also refined with noble qi, it was not pure true qi, but a vague thing like a book page. This book page seemed to be a seed, and also seemed to be a golden core, and even like a turtle shell. However, although there were some simple inscriptions on the book page, the outline of the book page had already been destroyed, like a mulberry leaf that had been swallowed by a silkworm, very damaged. Fu Jiwen slightly sensed it, and couldn't help but smile bitterly. This book page was his biggest secret, and no one had ever revealed it. Although he still didn't know what this book page in his middle dantian was, he did know that it was extraordinary. Taking a deep breath, Fu Jiwen urged his Confucian cultivation method, opened his mouth, and the abundant noble qi rushed into his body. It didn't need to pass through any meridians, and directly penetrated into the book page in his middle dantian. The book page flashed with a faint white light, and the white brilliance was like strands of silk, slowly winding around and repairing it. Ah! Just as Fu Jiwen took his first breath, a scene that he would never forget stunned him. He was so shocked that he even forgot to repair the book page in his body. He looked at Xiaohua, who was standing in front of him, with an inconceivable gaze. The current Xiaohua was so shocking that he could shock the world. A faint green brilliance was leisurely emerging from between his eyebrows like a layer of faint fog. Along with this green light, a loud sound like a big yellow bell came out of his mouth. Once this sound came out, not to mention the hundreds of children, even the recitation of the thousands of students in the academy was immediately suppressed. -12. Chapter 33-44. Not only that, a green dot of light the size of a soybean appeared along with the thunderous roar. The moment this dot of light appeared, it immediately caused a phenomenon in the sky. The sky above the Imperial Academy was filled with raging winds and dark clouds. Waves of dull thunder rumbled along with the dark clouds. Before Fu Jiwen could see it clearly, another strange sound came from Xiaohua's mouth, and in an instant, another green dot of light flew out. Boom, boom, boom! This light spot had an even more drastic change. Hundreds and thousands of lightning bolts as thick as a thumb flashed and surged towards the Imperial Academy. The lightning bolts landed on the Z on top of the professor's head, and the green word net formed by thousands of students reciting poems. What frightened Fu Jiwen even more was that the seemingly indestructible green word net, the words that easily shattered his 36 heavenly dipper soul formation, and the hundreds of poems that even Taoist techniques found difficult to shatter, were actually melting faster than snow in the face of boiling water. Even the Z that the professor was so proud of, the Z that was formed by words and the noble spirit, collapsed under the lightning bolts. Not only did it turn into dull and lifeless words, it also turned into the purest noble spirit under the green lightning bolts. Lightning attracting technique. Fu Jiwen suddenly realized and thought of a Taoist abhijna from long ago. He was astonished. In fact, not only was Fu Jiwen stunned, even Xiaohua himself did not expect this lightning and thunder technique to have such a miraculous effect on the Confucian cultivator's 100 scholars chant. Xiaohua was first shocked for a moment, then he immediately roared into the sky. Ha ha ha! Xiaohua laughed in his heart and thought to himself, "This is really a fake meeting the real thing. Just now he looked unusually ferocious, but now he is so weak. So he is just a good-looking but useless piece of trash." Xiaohua's roar did not stop. Following his roar, the word lightning flashed continuously. The lightning bolts in the sky fell like raindrops, smashing onto the heads of the students of the Imperial Academy. Xiao Hua squinted his eyes and looked at the streaks of green lightning striking Do Shan Jun's head and around. He shouted fiercely, "Damn it, even if I don't kill you, I will destroy your pretty face!" Of course, this was only Xiao Hua's idea. He activated the art of lightning and thunder to trap Elder Yuan's students and Professor Dushan Jundu. Following which, he rode his heavenly horse and galloped across the sky, charging towards the Imperial Academy. "Still want to leave? Jiang Wenhao! Hand over your life!" Jiang Wenhao was indeed smart. Seeing that Do Shan Jun's chorus of the 100 seedlings was defeated by Xiao Hua, he had already fled and rushed towards the depths of the Imperial Academy on his flying sword. Unfortunately, Xiao Hua's soul consciousness had already locked onto him. The heavenly horse crossed the red wall of the Imperial Academy. Xiao Hua roared and a few more streaks of lightning fell from the sky, blocking Jiang Wenhao's path. "Senior Xiao!" Jiang Wenhao turned pale with fright and said with an apologetic smile, "This is all a misunderstanding. This junior has already explained everything clearly. If you don't believe me, this junior won't leave and will accompany senior." "Oh?" Xiao Hua's gaze was like lightning. He looked straight at Jiang Wenhao and laughed coldly. "Jiang Wenhao, what's the use of saying so much now? No matter what happens today, no matter who comes, no matter if you are innocent or not, I will definitely take your head. Say, senior." Seeing the lightning bolts falling, Jiang Wenhao wanted to spit out his flying sword to resist, but he did not dare to do so. However, he was also unwilling to surrender. Unknowingly, he felt a little despondent. He did not know if he was feeling regret or something else. Just as Jiang Wenhao was worrying about his gains and losses, suddenly, all the earth-shattering noises disappeared. It was as if all the lightning in the sky was just a golden millet. "Ah? What's going on?" Jiang Wenhao stared blankly. Just as he was about to look around, Xiao Hua's shocked and angry voice exploded in his ears like a clap of thunder. "Evil creature, you still say you didn't do any evil? Look at what's in your arms." "What?" Jiang Wenhao was originally a little dazed. Xiao Hua's angry roar was deliberate and directly shocked him into a daze. Jiang Wenhao could not help but lower his head to look. Indeed, a corner of a jade tablet was revealed in his arms. Jiang Wenhao pulled the jade tablet out and threw it out as if he had seen a ghost. He shouted, "No, you are framing me. I have already thrown this jade tablet too." At this point, Jiang Wenhao seemed to have realized something. His face was as white as paper and he stood in midair in a daze. It seems like I am framing you." Xiao Hua, who had just retracted his lightning and thunder technique, said plainly. "So you have already thrown this jade tablet away? I wonder, where did you throw it to?" "Of course, it doesn't matter where you threw it to. The important thing is, this jade tablet belongs to the Seven Suns Temple. How did it end up in your hands? Why did you throw it away with a guilty conscience?" Xiao Hua's face was filled with a cold smile. He waved his hand and the jade tablet slowly landed in his hand. To be honest, he did not care about this jade tablet. It was only when Jiang Wenhao escaped from the Imperial Academy and hid this item in a tree hole that he remembered that he did not obtain any information about this jade tablet from Wu Qian's memories. It was probably Jiang Wenhao who saw this jade tablet on the spur of the moment. It was also because of this spur of the moment that he exposed himself and finally admitted that he was in charge of the Seven Suns Temple tragedy in front of the Imperial Academy students. "Jiang Wenhao!" Without waiting for Xiao Hua to say anything, Professor Dou's face was already paler than a sheet of paper. It was a pity that there were no scars on his face. Professor Dou lamented. "You! How could you be so heartless? I have misjudged you." Jiang Wenhao was only momentarily absent-minded. Now that he had regained his composure, he no longer cared about his reputation. The sword radiance beneath his feet was activated and he charged into the Imperial Academy. "Trying to escape?" Xiao Hua laughed coldly. "If I don't kill you today, I am not worthy of being a Taoist disciple." As he spoke, he leaped onto the Pegasus. The Pegasus did not wait for Xiaohua's orders and it chased after Jiang Wenhao like a ray of light. Xiaohua! Professor Dou looked dispirited, but he still stepped on the cloud and shouted. Even if Jiang Wenhao did evil, that is the Imperial Academy's problem. We have the right to punish our own disciples. You are a Taoist disciple, you have no right. That's right, Jiang Wenhao had exposed himself and the Imperial Academy's reputation had been tarnished. If the Imperial Academy wanted to regain their reputation, the only way was to punish Jiang Wenhao personally, or even kill him. However, if Xiaohua were to kill Jiang Wenhao now, not only would the Imperial Academy lose their chance to regain their reputation, Xiaohua would also make things worse for the Imperial Academy. There was no way they could regain their reputation no matter what. Therefore, Dou Shan hurriedly chased after Xiaohua, even though he knew that he was no match for Xiaohua. Ha! Dream on! Xiaohua laughed arrogantly. I will take Jiang Wenhao's life today! As he spoke, Xiaohua glanced at the group of students who were chasing after him. The lightning flashes and thunder rolls technique was unleashed again. Lightning of various colors appeared out of thin air. Humph, rascal! Suddenly, a disdainful snort could be heard in the air above the Imperial Academy. Once these three words appeared, the noble spirit around the Imperial Academy immediately surged, as though there was a change in the weather. Hum hum hum! Immediately after, 100 pure white light pillars suddenly emerged from the righteous Qi. The light pillars were even sharper than a huge sword and even faster than lightning as they pierced into Xiaohua's lightning. The lightning flashes and thunder rolls that were previously invincible were instantly pierced full of holes by the light pillars. This? Xiaohua turned pale with fright. Before he could summon the lightning flashes and thunder rolls technique again, an incomparably righteous noble spirit rushed out from somewhere in the Imperial Academy, like a giant hammer striking towards him. Before the noble spirit even reached him, a feeling of indescribable pain emerged from the bottom of his heart. Let's go quickly, this is a great scholar who can refine his energy. Fu Jiwen's reaction was faster than Xiaohua's as he hurriedly urged. It's just refine his energy and refine his energy. Xiaohua cursed in his heart, but he did not dare to be negligent. He patted the Pegasus beneath him and the Pegasus fluttered its feathers as it soared into the sky. Before the noble spirit could reach him, he had already escaped far away. Dean, Dou Shanjun stopped in midair and bowed respectfully. I am not talented enough to disturb your cultivation. The dean's voice could be heard. The matter at the Seven Suns Temple is no small matter, you must. Before the dean could finish his sentence, Xiaohua's cold voice could be heard from the sky. There is noble spirit in the world. This noble spirit is the principle. Which is the principle? The principle is like a sword that hangs above one's head. Regardless of whether it is a great scholar or a student, as long as he touches this sword, he will definitely die. I am not talented enough, but since I want to take Jiang Wenhao's life, then I must do it. Hearing Xiaohua's words, Professor Dou's face revealed a puzzled expression. He raised his head and looked at Jiang Wenhao, whose face was as pale as death. At this moment, two small heads popped out from Jiang Wenhao's bosom. These two things were like black lightning and yellow wind as they flew out from Jiang Wenhao's bosom and disappeared in midair in an instant. Professor Dou did not even understand how the two little things flew away. Looking at Jiang Wenhao again, there was a shallow crack on his neck. Gradually, pitch-black blood flowed out, and countless black threads around the crack instantly spread to Jiang Wenhao's entire body. Rumble! Countless pillars of noble spirit condensed into noble spirit, majestically attacking the fleeing Xiaohua. However, just as these pillars of noble spirit were formed, Xiaohua's divine sense, which was comparable to a middle nascent soul stage, rushed over like a tidal wave. Bang! 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 There was a burst of chaotic sounds, like concentrated firecrackers. Soon after, the noble spirit slowly dispersed. Humph! This was the dean's last bit of sound, and then, there was no sound. This? Professor Dou looked at Jiang Wenhao's corpse falling from midair. Before it even landed on the ground, it had already turned into ink-dripping fragments. He could not help but feel a trace of coldness in his heart. Xiao Hua's methods were indeed strange, but they were also flawless, making him feel powerless as if he was not an enemy. -12. Chapter 33:45. Dean! Professor Hu flew over quietly and said softly, Xiao Hua of this sect is really powerful. It turned out that he had already buried a demon pet in Jiang Wenhao's body before seeing him. He could kill Jiang Wenhao with just a thought. And that aura was so terrifying that even the dean did not dare to kill him. It is not only because our academy is in the wrong. Sigh, yes. Professor Dou suddenly felt depressed. He defended Jiang Wenhao for half a day, but he did not expect Jiang Wenhao to be the real culprit. And Xiao Hua was just watching the show. Everything that happened before was just a monkey trick. Xiao Hua did not kill Jiang Wenhao because he wanted to find a moment of absent-mindedness and let him tell the truth. After pondering for a while, Professor Dou said, To be honest, this method is more reasonable than the so-called laws of the government. I really can't have the heart to kill Xiao Hua. You're right, Minister. Professor Hu nodded. This is also because our Imperial Academy is powerful. With the Dean and Dean in charge, the Taoist sect did not dare to do anything. They only dare to kill when they have real evidence. Professor Dou smiled bitterly. He looked at the gradually restored order under his feet and said, With this evidence, not only will the Imperial Academy's gate be destroyed for nothing, even if the Imperial Academy wants to find trouble with him, we will not be able to. Not only that, Professor Hu said again, I still have to think of how to explain to the Jiang family. Jiang family? Professor Dou's slender eyes flashed with a trace of sternness. I have long heard that the Jiang family coveted Xichao Ridge. I am afraid this is the Jiang family's instigator. What do we have to explain to the Jiang family? Just let them do as they please. There is the blood monument of Xiao Hua in the Seven Suns Temple. If the Jiang family has the guts, they can take over Xichao Ridge. After he finished speaking, Professor Dou flicked his sleeves and a ball of auspicious clouds appeared beneath his feet, carrying him out of the Imperial Academy. As for where he went, no one knew. However, the direction he went was completely different from the direction Xiao Hua escaped to. 100 li away from the Copper Pillar State, Xiao Hua was sitting on a Pegasus amidst the astral winds. The scattered light from the Pegasus not only covered Xiao Hua and Fujiwen, but also covered Dao Shan's remains on the carriage. Although the wind was howling, Xiao Hua and the others' hair and Taoist robes did not move at all. Haha, awesome, awesome! Looking at the clear and cloudless sky, then looking at the blazing sun behind him, Xiao Hua let out a long howl and said loudly, Senior's godly skill is truly admirable. At this point, how could Fujiwen still dare to call Xiao Hua fellow Taoist? He spoke very respectfully. Hee, it's nothing. Xiao Hua waved his hand indifferently. There are some restrictions on this old man's body that are only 40% effective. Otherwise, I wouldn't have to run away in fear when I saw the old ghost. Hee. Fujiwen also didn't know whether Xiao Hua was telling the truth or not. He faintly smiled, lowered his head to look at the ground that was already extremely small, and suddenly cried out. Senior, did you go the wrong way? Xiao Jian and the rest did not go this way. Xiao Hua did not think much of it. It would be weird if he did not get lost. However, he did not point it out. He looked at the carriage behind him and said, I know the direction is wrong. However, I am not chasing after the three of them. I am going to bury Master Dao Shan's remains. Previously, in order to let Master Dao Shan rest in peace, I exposed his remains in front of everyone. Now that I have avenged him, I have to find a good place to bury him. Senior! Fujiwen naturally looked at Dao Shan as well. However, he suddenly exclaimed in shock. Master Dao Shan's eyes are closed. Oh? Really? Xiao Hua hurriedly looked again. Sure enough, Dao Shan's eyes, which he had dyed with remaining grievances, were now closed. The horrifying expression on his face had been replaced with a serene expression. Ba, Xiao Hua could not help but shout. There is kindness in the human world. Master Dao Shan can finally rest in peace. Amitba? Fu Jiwen looked at Xiao Hua and could not help but curse. Senior Xiao killed people without blinking. You actually dared to chant the name of Buddha? Oh right, little friend Fu. Xiao Hua thought of something and said, Do you know if there is a place with beautiful scenery? Oh, or is it the place with good feng shui that you mentioned? Fu Jiwen shook his head and said embarrassedly, Junior only heard about it. I am not proficient in it. I am not even as good as Xiao Jian. If Senior wants to find a place with excellent feng shui, why don't you ask Xiao Jian? Xiao Jian? That guy knows about feng shui? Xiao Hua was surprised. He suddenly remembered the scene of Xiao Jian selling fortune-telling on the streets of Longevity Town. Don't be fooled by him. Fu Jiwen smiled and said, Senior, don't belittle Taoist Xiao. He has some real skills in him. If he doesn't know anything, how can he fool others? That's true. Xiao Hua nodded and looked around. He looked at the north, south, east, and west, then asked, Where did they go? After Fu Jiwen pointed in the direction, Xiao Hua urged the Pegasus to carry Dao Shan's corpse and chase after them. Senior, seeing that the Pegasus had attracted the attention of many passers-by and many elderly, women and children bowed down in fear, Fu Jiwen could not help but remind Xiao Hua softly, We just offended the Imperial Academy in the Bronze Pillar Country. This should be within the borders of the Bronze Pillar Country. Senior, can you keep the Pegasus? Moreover, Master Dao Shan's corpse is not suitable for others to see. If it is not convenient for Senior, how about I keep it in my small Qiankun bag? No need, I will do it myself. Xiao Hua used his spiritual will to scan the area. As he answered, he rode the Pegasus to a place where there was no one and kept Dao Shan's corpse. He casually threw the old carriage on the ground and kept the Pegasus as well. Fu Jiwen saw how casual Xiao Hua was and could not help but show admiration in his eyes. He could not help but say, Senior's demonic pet is really powerful. Its flying speed is even faster than the Pegasus. Today, if not for a Senior releasing these two demon pets first and leaving them by Jiang Wenhao's side in advance, I'm afraid that going to find Jiang Wenhao again would be even more difficult. Not necessarily. Xiao Hua laughed coldly. Even without the help of these two little things, I will kill my way into the Bronze Pillar Country in 10 days. If the Imperial Academy protects Jiang Wenhao, I will destroy the Imperial Academy. If the Jiang family protects Jiang Wenhao, I will uproot the Jiang family. Since the day I set up the Blood Monument, my Taoist disciples will not be bullied. Especially Master Dao Shan, he is a true Taoist master that I respect. 10 days? Fu Jiwen was slightly puzzled, but he suddenly realized. Senior, you mean, you will break into the Jiang family of the Bronze Pillar Country in 10 days? And kill the rest of them one by one? That's right. I have the same intention. Xiao Hua's eyes flashed with a cold light. Blood grudges must be repaid with blood. I want to let the Confucian cultivators of the hidden immortal continent know not to provoke me. If they provoke me, I will definitely make them suffer. Fu Jiwen smiled bitterly. The current Xiao Hua was obviously different from the Xiao Hua he saw last night at Zhai Xinglu. He was less amiable and more murderous. Fu Jiwen thought for a while and suggested, If Senior feels that you can challenge the entire Jiang family of Confucian cultivators, then Junior will not dare to stop you. But if Senior has not reached the divine transformation stage of Taoist, Junior feels that Senior should wait for a few more days. After all, Senior killed Jiang Wenhao and alarmed the Jiang family. You have also offended the Imperial Academy, and the Bronze Pillar Country. Especially, the other martial masters who committed the crime. I am afraid that news of them has already spread. It will be difficult for you to find them alone. Sigh. Xiao Hua sighed and looked at the barren land in front of him. However, there were still some crops desperately trying to grow. He said, I know that Jiang Wenhao will definitely not do it himself. I also want to kill those accomplices first. But there are always a few ways to deal with things. Each method has its advantages and disadvantages. I am afraid that I have chosen the most difficult method, which is also the most disadvantageous. However, I do not regret it. For Master Dao Shan, an old man who has been silently contributing to Taoist sects, I am willing to overturn the entire Bronze Pillar country. Senior, please follow Xiao Jian to another place first. First, you should finish your own matters, Fu Jiwen said with a smile. When Junior returns, I will secretly look for these people. When Junior has news, how about it? And that is the only way. Xiao Hua was helpless. He was now alone. If he were to look for these people by himself, it would be like looking for a needle in a haystack. Moreover, Xiao Hua was not good at looking for people. However, Xiao Hua immediately felt a little embarrassed. His heart was moved and he said with a smile, "Little friend Fu, you and I have never met before. It is just that we have hit it off at first sight. Last night and even today, you have helped this old man too much. This old man does not know how to thank you." Looking at Xiao Hua's smiling appearance, Fu Jiwen was also enlightened. The words that Xiao Hua had said when he killed Jiang Wenhao suddenly appeared in his mind. My Tao is the Tao of heaven. My path is the path to the heavens. From now on, my Tao is not alone. How heroic was this? What kind of spirit was this to trample the heavens and earth under one's feet? The meaning of Xiao Hua's words was clear. Fu Jiwen could not help but be moved at this moment. It was a pity that if such heroic words were said by the Imperial Academy, Fu Jiwen would probably kneel down and acknowledge him as his master. However, since it was said by Xiao Hua, Fu Jiwen could not help but reconsider. Fu Jiwen saw Xiao Hua's courage to barge into the Imperial Academy. Fu Jiwen also saw Xiao Hua's loyalty in killing Jiang Wenhao. Fu Jiwen also saw the righteousness that Xiao Hua gave him with the thunder-amplifying wood. However, if Fu Jiwen wanted to abandon everything and acknowledge Xiao Hua as his master and completely walk on the narrow path of Taoist sects, Fu Jiwen could not help but hesitate. 12. You're tuning into the Phoenix Knights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.